Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, Unresolved Textual Tension. It's me, your host, Maria, and with me today, my ruggedly handsome co-host, William.
Hey guys, Maria, what book are we doing today?
Alchemised by
SenLinYu.
SenLinYu. This is a book. It's a book, and by that I mean it is long. This is a tome. If you needed to grab a book to murder someone with, and you had a hardcover of this would be a good option. I would say that this would be one to do it with, and you might be saying, Maria, what is Alchemized? Mayhaps I haven't heard of it. Could you explain?
Okay, so Alchemized was originally a fanfic from the Harry Potter fandom that was a Dramione one, which is when Draco Malfoy and Hermione get it on. It was extremely popular to the point where there were copyright problems because people kept wanting a bound version of the fanfic, so they'd go to Etsy to buy one, but you can't. That's illegal. You can't do that. It's intellectual property. And so supposedly that's one of the reasons the author, SenLinYu, decided to publish this non-fanfic version of it. SenLinYu is non-binary, so we'll try to respect that here. If you're weird about it in the comments, I will ban you. But they
and he means if you're weird about it, as in saying non-binary people don't exist.
Yes,
we will ban you because
that happens every once in a while.
We don't fuck with that.
Despite this being Harry Potter adjacent, we do not fuck with that kind of bigotry.
Yes.
And so this is a version that the author, they took down Manacled, which was the original fic, and they reworked it 3 times, apparently, 3 major work throughs, because I read some interviews with them, and then published it as Alchemized. So originally we had gotten, back when Manacled was a big thing, some people were like, oh, are you going to do that? That would be great for you guys to roast. And I was like, no, because I feel strongly that fanfic is different than original fiction in terms of how you read it. It really only makes sense in the context of being immersed in a fandom, looking for the tropes of a fandom, and even if it's a very shippy fic, being immersed in that ship. So there's a certain amount of understood things that go through it. What happened to your face?
Sorry, Data jumped on my desk. He is now behind the laptop, rubbing his face on the back of it. And
he wants to be part of it.
And I'm like, buddy, this is too precarious a position. There's so many things on this desk you could knock over. Come back.
He's like, I'm gonna cat.
Come back.
There we go. And so I at the time was like, oh no, we're not going to do that. It's not fair. But this is now a published book for money, and that is different. So we are doing it, and I mean, I think we should just cut straight to it. This is an awful book. This is so bad. A lot of its problems come from the fact that it was originally a fanfic, and the author, despite having reworked parts of it quite a lot, it still has the fundamental problem that you require the Harry Potter context to understand it well and for it to be effective. I think the best way to define fanfic is that it is a work that really that is very much in conversation with another work and requires you to know the other work to understand the full context of it. And this is still very much that. It's very thin on its own.
Yes, and especially the first half is so much weaker because of this. The second half fixes that a little bit more, but then has a lot of its own problems, because by the time you hit the second half, you've been in the world long enough, and we get this very, 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 the middle section is just a lot of the context that you potentially would have needed earlier to make the beginning also. Cat. You're really cramping the vibes here, buddy.
He really wants to be part of it.
Do not jump on that bookshelf. I will murder you. You will bring it down. Come down here, please. Okay.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that when you transition. Actually, no, I forgot what I was going to say.
I was finishing the point that the second half works better because you've spent more time with the characters in the world for it to function a bit more on its own, but it has so many other problems that are, I think, grounded in the fact that it was a fan fiction. And I am really interested in this as a case study for how to kind of walk away, like how if you're going to take something that was a fan fiction and turn it into a published novel, how to do that in a more effective way, because that is what this book is trying to do. Sometimes people argue with us that we are not engaging with a book in what it was trying to do and in its goals. And so my purpose when I read this was to engage with it from the point of view of, if I was an editor looking at this and somebody said I need to take this, and like I've done it a couple times, but I need to separate this more from its life as a fic, how would I do so? That's where a lot of how I read this and how I process this, because I think that's a value. One of the things that I do not want to do too much is talk about this in conversation with the actual Harry Potter books, for multiple reasons, but the biggest one being J.K. Rowling is a terrible person, and I do not want to give her anything. I don't want this to be a video that advertises those books in any way, shape, or form. But if you ever decide to like reread or engage, I heard pirate ships are really nice. Like if you want to read it on a pirate ship,
ahoy mateys,
ahoy matey. But it suffers from, again, the beginning is so hard to get engaged to, for exactly what Will said, because there is this whole context of characters and emotion that, like, if you were reading this as a fic, you would be like, oh yeah, I'm already invested in all of these characters, these things, even in this new setting, because it is an AU fic, an alternate universe fic. And you can kind of just jump in, because this definitely is something where like the author, came in contact. I don't know if they read or watched The Handmaid's Tale, but like came in contact with that. And then we're like, ooh, like really fascinating thing that I want to use and explore my OTP through. And that's a really fascinating thing that fan fiction can do, where you can take an idea unrelated to the world of your OTP, your ship, and then be like, I'd like to explore them in this space, but you still have all the benefit of being in conversation with the original work and this new thing. And unfortunately, when you start this book, it is just so hard to care. And the main character, because of something that like the book justifies, but because of it is like reading from the point of view of a wet sponge. And like the book's like, yes, that was intentional, but it makes it very hard as a reader, if you do not already care about this character, to be like, oh yeah, I'm on board. Let's go. It's so long. It's so long in a way.
It's the longest book we've read for the podcast. The last one we read was the third Kushio book, which was 30 hours, and this is 36, I think, on Audible.
Yes.
It's so absurdly long. I saved this so that I could see Maria's reaction on the podcast, but I actually hadn't realized it was this long when I said we should do it, and it's insane. I thought it was just like one of our normal long books, and this is ultra long. And bear in mind, I listened to this at double speed. Like, I listened to this, and it only took me like 38 hours. 39. Nope. 19 is the word I meant to say.
Yeah, not 38. You doubled it. I don't know what happened there.
No, and this book, it was so painful to get through. The thing about it, the other thing to mention about it before we start complaining even more is that, like Marie said, I'm going to try to separate this as much as possible from the Harry Potter fandom. Also, just because I think, books should try to stand on their own. And part of the problem is that this can't. But I will probably still be referring to them by their canon names, because I just, that's how I am with names. You guys know that. The other thing to mention is that this was renowned for being a very dark fic, because of the content matter in it. And I guess we should jump into the premise then to explain that.
Yes.
Because basically, as a fic, what this was a Voldemort wins fic, which is like, okay, I mean, that's pretty explainable. The bad guy wins.
Yeah.
And in this case, the bad guy is Morrow. And Mara, okay, so there's this play. Okay, Maria, you want to just explain the plot?
Yeah. So welcome to Palladia. This is a city-state that has alchemists and is based around the Alchemy Institute, where people from all over Paladia and sometimes, if you're lucky, from other parts of the world get to come and study la alchemy, which is the magic of this world. And in this world, there has been a grand fighting between the Undying, the necromantic peoples, and the Eternal Flame. The Eternal Flame is kind of like the religious order slash structure of this world, where there was this principate named Lucian Holdfast, and the Holdfasts are the like monarchs of this society. They call them principates, and Lucian, also known as Luke Holdfast, is the last remaining heir. His father was killed by the Undying and the Necromancer, and there's this, and Morrow is the Necromancer, and he's like, you won't let people do vivimancy. Vivimancy is alchemy slash resonance. Resonance is their term for magic. So if you ever hear me say she couldn't feel her resonance, it's her magic. It's a resonance type that is specifically for body stuff. So you can heal people, but you can also reanimate dead people. So thus we have necromancy. And Morrow is like, oh, the Holdfast and the Eternal Flame hate people who have vivimancy, even though we're just normal people with a power we can't control. Why would you persecute us? And so he starts like recruiting. And there's also these guilds that are like trade guilds that have, like iron proficiencies and steel proficiencies and all this shit, and they're like we want more power and more say because we're building. And the Holdfast and the Eternal Flame are like, no ho ho, you just want profit and we're not going to let you do that, silly guilds. And so then the Necromancer Morrow is like, oh, come to me, guild masters, I shall give you immortality and you can join our cause. And then all the people who were secretly hiding their vivimancy were like, that sounds great, we've been living in the shadows this whole time, we get to go to you and we get to do cool shit and get to live forever. So it starts this whole war, and oh no, the Necromancer wins. Morrow wins. The Eternal Flame crushed out. Luke dead. Everything. He has won. The Institute is now the headquarters. The Institute is the Hogwarts analog. It was the Alchemy Institute where people studied. The Institute is now the headquarters for this dark evil regime called New Paladia. And our main character, Helena Marino, who is Greek / Italian coded in this world.
I thought she was like a little Asian coded as well.
So it's a southern island, so it's still close enough that you could get to it in like 3 days or in a couple of days, and it's south and it's islands. So I was like, are we talking like right? and she's tan skinned, like tanner, like olive. They say olive a couple times, with dark curly hair. And she speaks with her hands because the people of Etreus are very
vivacious.
Yeah, very vivacious. And so this is our Hermione analog. And she was she had a lot of resonance. She was really cool. She was from this other place, Etreus, and the Holdfasts were like, come study with us. You can come study at we're going to sponsor you to come study at our cool institute. And she was like, oh my God, I'm so smart and I have so much potential and you saw it and I love you. And her and Luke become friends, and they also become friends with these two twins named Soren and Lila. We'll talk about them, who are from the Bayard family, and they become friends. But then after all of this happens, our girl Helena wakes up in a what are those called? The something tanks?
It's like a cryo tank, essentially.
Like a cryo tank, like a stasis tank. There we go. She wakes up in a stasis tank, and she's been awake in the stasis tank. She doesn't know how long, but it's been a long time. And she wakes up, and she's in the hands of the Undying, in the heart of their system. And they're like, oh, who are you? You weren't cataloged correctly. And she was like, I can't remember anything. I don't know how I got here. And they're like, your mind has been tampered with. And your memories have been sealed away. And Morrow's like, I want her memories. She's the last of the Eternal Flame. She must be hiding something. I want those memories. We shall send her to the only animancer. Animancers are people with resonance who can go into your mind and do mind stuff. So, like, they can access your memories. They can torture you internally. They can fuck with your brain.
Yeah. They are legitimacy.
Yeah.
Legitimacy.
Yeah.
Whatever it was called in Harry
In
Potter is
Harry
the one
Potter.
magic.
But like they can do mind stuff, and it's an offshoot of Vivimancy, but not everyone has it. Morrow has it, but who also has it and is much healthier than Morrow, because Morrow's not doing too good, is the High Reeve. Who's the High Reeve, you should ask? It's Kane Farron. Draco
I hate the name
Malfoy.
so much.
I know. Draco Malfoy.
Especially because he's an iron like magic user, so it's Farron. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, no, it's like Sith names. Like they're just a few letters different.
People who are like bear-like and they name him Bjorn.
Yeah.
Like that kind of stuff. And Morrow's like, oh, I can't go into her brain with my animancy. We're going to send it to the High Reeve, and he shall slowly, through this process we're calling transmutation, which is trying to put your consciousness into somebody else's consciousness, and then we can see if we can access her memories. So they send her to the High Reeve's house, and he's a real dick, and he's real rude and stuff, and she's like, I don't like it here. I'm also very afraid of the dark. I'll explain all of this later. And that's the premise of the book. Helena doesn't remember how she got here, what happened. There's huge chunks of her memory that have been cut off from her by someone. They think it's this lady named Elaine, but they're not really sure. And now Farron has to systematically try get into her brain, access her memories, and other things that they then decide they have to do, because as I mentioned, this is also sort of inspired by The Handmaid's Tale, so we get some shit that really didn't need to be here. But that's the premise. Congratulations, you've been premised.
Bam! I should have a graphic come across the screen. Okay, here's the thing. The first chapter of this book is not terrible, but you immediately start to feel the gaps where the original fic would have been better. So, like, one of the overwhelming problems with this is that, first of all, the structure of this story is fucking bizarre and really only makes sense if you assume that the author wrote it one chapter at a time. And the thing about it is that for the first, like, fifth of this book, it depends on Helena being real sad about all the resistance fighters and Luke being dead. But the thing is, that works if you have 7 books of context for the friendship between Hermione and Harry and the way that they're like the main characters there, and then when they're dethroned and killed, one of them's killed, it's like, wow, that's actually pretty shocking. Whereas Luke is just some random name we keep hearing about. The book doesn't put in the work to make you understand why him and her were close, or why he was so important to her. And like, that is just a problem. Morrow as a character is not very scary when he first shows up, even though the author tries to do like a lot of body horror in this book. Not well, I should note. Me and Katie did a critique stream where we looked at writers who actually write body horror well, and how this book is a paltry shadow of them. If you want to join our Patreon, we have
get access to that.
Yeah, me and Katie go line by line, prose by prose. He doesn't have the menace that like Voldemort would have, because Voldemort has been built up by the writer who will not be named, and you are coming into it with that. You're even like in a fic, you're like, oh, I'm kind of discovering this new world. What's changed?
Yes.
What's different?
And you're actively enjoying the changes by virtue of it being, especially if you've been like, you know, you've been starved for a while, you haven't found a good fic, and here you find one that is. And the thing I'm going to say is, I don't think the author is an incompetent writer. I think like on a basic level, outside of like when like they're trying to punch above their pay grade a little bit with some of the body horror stuff, I don't like. There was never a point where, except for there's a couple of things I'm going to say with how they phrase some stuff that I'll mention, but there are times where, like, you know, like, I think the prose is perfectly serviceable. There are some scenes that have good descriptions and, like, kind of, you know, pack a punch. Unfortunately, it is just encased in this overlarge, just...
So the way I felt about it was that the author isn't incompetent. They're not great, but they're not bad. But there's no parts of this book that are good. Usually when there's an author with kind of a mixed skill set, like some part of the book will be good. There's no part of this book that is good. all of it is bad, but I do think the author could write a good book if the incentives in the industry were set up that way, which they aren't. Yeah.
And I think you're right, Will, where the context of their friendship really needed to be built better, because if you're just coming to this as a new reader with no context, let's say you don't even know that this previously was a fan fiction, and or what it was based on, you're gonna come in and be like, I don't know who these characters are. And unfortunately, because when the book starts, Helena is missing so much of her memories. She is disconnected from a lot of like herself, and she also just like doesn't remember shit. And it makes it very hard to be emotionally grounded in a character who like she feels it, especially for the first, I want to say 5 chapters, she feels like binoculars where things are happening around her.
Yep.
And she is
Security cam.
she's just taking it in and seeing it happen, and we're just seeing it as it happens, but she's not really interacting. And again, she's just woken up from 14 months of being conscious in a stasis chamber. And so like, but unfortunately the book needed to have done something before this to give us an idea, number one, that this is a lesser version of Helena, because like if you know going in that this is a lesser version of Helena because you have experience with what Helena is normally like, then you're like, oh, okay, the trauma of it all. But unfortunately, at first you're like, is she just a cardboard cutout? Like you're not sure what's happening, and you don't fully grasp like some of the stuff that's happened to her. It's not really until later that it really comes into focus. And I think a much better starting point would have been to start with a not super long, but a decent prologue that was prior to the war starting, a scene between her, Luke, Soren, and Lila, and their friend, or I mean, I think it would even be good because Lila is the Ginny analog. She's twins with the Ron analog. But I think it would have been really, there's this point where we hear about, there was this whole period where like Lila had to go away for like a year, and then she comes back and Luke's like, hot damn, I was into her before, but I'm more into her now. And I thought could have been really cool if the scene had been like, and because I've been trying to think of this engaging with what the text is trying to do and how to bring a new reader in and couch them in it. And I think it would have worked better to have the scene of the three of them waiting for Lila. You know, Luke's nervous, he's unfocused, he's not doing his homework. She's snapping at him like, you got to finish this. We have to get it done. And it can kind of build and also potentially separate it a bit more from what our expectations are from before. Like to have the scene entirely between Luke and her, instead of, because unfortunately you always have the problem of if you let Soren comes in, it just immediately feels like the trio. And one of the things that this book tries to do is say that it was more of like a quartet, like Lila, except for the period where she's gone, being part of it. And again, I think that's tried to make some difference. But like have a scene between the two of them where you feel their friendship, you feel the intimacy between these two people, the comfort, and just couch us in the world a bit and in these characters and what they're supposed to be like.
I think so completely, because I think one of the problems is that, often in writing, they'll say that you want a character to be active instead of passive. And the reason for that is because action defines you. It makes you, you're making decisions which are telling you something about what the character values and what they don't, and how they operate and how they don't. And the big problem with Helena is that for the first fifth of this book, and actually even a lot of the rest of the book, she does nothing. She just, like Maria said, she's just security cam footage of what's going on. And so, and if you're reading this as a fic, you're like, oh no, what's happened to Hermione? She's not usually like this. There's a disconnect between how she's acting and what she knows versus what how she's acting now. But we don't have that context. So that's why what Maria says about having that as a prologue makes a lot of sense, because it would tell you a lot about how she's supposed to be, and then that contrasts with how she is now.
It would give so much context. And also because one of the things that the book doesn't do, like there's a point, I think like in the 3rd or 4th chapter, where someone's like, oh, she did very well at the Institute. She had high marks. And like, that's the most that you're told that this character is supposed to be a very smart person. Again, I'm familiar with the source material, so I came in expecting that. But if you are not familiar with the source material, it takes a while for you to realize that this girl's a brainiac. She's got the goods.
No, there's so many things that are informed that you know from Hermione, but you don't know. So, like, about halfway through the book will start talking about how she's never quite felt like she fits in because of her hair, and it's always been a thing she has to, like, manage. And if you're like, oh, yeah, no, that's Hermione. Hermione is always mentioning her hair like that. In this book, like, halfway through, she's like, I can't believe that Draco likes my actual hair. Nobody's ever found it beautiful before. And it's like, bitch, you have mentioned this once before this. This is not something where, like, you have to get up early in the morning to plait your hair. You have to use like, that is not, those are not scenes integrated into the book that show that. It's just a thing that's informed because you know it from the original.
Yeah.
Again, that's going to just be so many of the problems here.
And there's so many things that are changed. Like Helena is from Etris, this other place. She's very Italian, Greek coded. And with like the darker features and having to suppress her like animated hands and stuff like that. And also like Luke, the Harry analog, is blonde. And like there's so many things. The Bayards are brown. Like there's so many things that have been changed as far as how they integrate that I legitimately did not know Helena had curly, unwieldy hair until that halfway point where the book suddenly starts, or like I want to say like 1/4 the way through. And unfortunately, I say 1/4, and you're like, that's not a lot of time, Maria. Like, I'm talking the length of a normal ass book, guys. Into this, did I realize that her hair was anyway notable to be different and had to be managed, and that she suppressed herself in a way to fit in. Everyone liked her, like, and this is something that you only get halfway through. Everyone likes her better with her braids rather than her like full hair. And honestly, I actually think it was maybe halfway through the book, because I think it was only in the flashbacks. I can't remember if it was in the part 1. I don't remember, but it's bizarre. And it's these kinds of things where the book forgets that it's trying to be an original fiction and doesn't put that groundwork in. So for instance, if in the scene, the flashback scene with Luke, they're sitting there and she keeps like pinning her hair back, and Luke's like, why don't you just braid it? Like, just do, and they have a conversation. Immediately, you automatically know this bitch got curly ass hair that people notice and are comfortable enough commenting on. Because one of the things we're going to get throughout the book is that Helena is acted upon by the forces around her, and she feels grateful for everything she's been given, and thus she lets it happen. And so this would be a great scene in a very innocent way that would then come back later as less innocent, of how she's being shaped and kind of hinged in by the expectations of this society that she's worked herself into. But again, in this beginning scene, it wouldn't be seen that way. It would just be this conversation between friends, someone seeing something and then recommending whatever the case is. And then again, grounding the friendship, grounding the level of intimacy that he could say that, and her willingness to be like, yeah, that's actually a good idea. And then like just setting up the world, the friendship. And because the other thing that happens, and it gets a bit better, but it really doesn't, is the world, like the descriptions of the setting is so minimal that a lot of times, like there was this one point where she was in a room with a bed, and I was like, were you not? But like there was so little description of what things looked like that I was like, because like there were these scenes with multiple characters and they were talking, they were having these intense conversations, but there was so little. It was just like I was watching a stage show and the lights were on the people and then everything around them was dark, and that's unfortunately how a lot of it felt. And it gets
I don't know, Maria. There's a lot in this book about the society and culture and food, and actually not the food, just the society. There's so much info dumping in this book. Oh my God, you guys do not understand. Yeah. And you are not going to understand how much and how awful filler it is from this conversation, because we're just not going to mention it. But literally think about every 30 seconds, imagine this podcast, but every 30 seconds, me and Maria stop to tell you something about the world for 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And that's 20 seconds of every minute is just bullshit stuff about the history of this world and magic that we do not care about and does not matter.
And
And the reason it does not matter is because it wasn't there originally. So it is not specific or necessary for this world to function. It is extraneous. And the thing about info dumping is that it cannot be extraneous. It needs to tell you something about the characters and themes at the same time that it relays important information that you need to understand the context. None of that happens here.
yeah, unfortunately, in this beginning portion, so I'm really quick. I'm just going to tell you what happens in this beginning portion, and then I'll remember this, Will, that where we're talking about the info dumping because info dumping because I have a specific thing to say. So the basic start of this is Helena gets woken up out of the stasis thing. People are like, "Who are you? There was not supposed to be anyone in here. You're not the person that we have in a wow. We have an extra whole ass human in here." And then they send someone, and there's this lady, and her name's Stroud, and she's like, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And Helena's like, I don't remember shit. And then Stroud is a vivimancer, and she looks into her brain, and she's like, your brain's been fucked with. And then they take her to Morrow, and Morrow's like, her brain's been fucked with. Somebody has stopped the paths into her mind. And she's got these manacles on that suppress her resonance, so she can't really use her magic or anything, but like she still feels it. She can still kind of like feel that it's happening. And they're like, let's bring in these two other people that kind of knew stuff. And you get into this one lady was like, I didn't like her and I really hated her and she tortured me back when she was part of the resistance. So I made her disappear and didn't catalog her properly, even though she was supposed to be interviewed. And Morrow's like, fuck you, Mendel. I shall put your consciousness into a shitty ass dying body. There's these things called necrothols. I need to explain it. It's basically a dead body that is being animated for servitude purposes. So there's no real conscious in it. It is being just puppeted by whoever is doing it. And Mora was like, I'm sticking you in the shitty Necrothal body. And so like she went from being in her own body to being in this other one. And she's like, no, master, I shall serve you. And then they bring in this other person named Shiseo, because Shiseo was a guy who had actually been part of the Institute and had been there during the resistance stage. So maybe he knew stuff. And he was like, oh, I don't really remember. And I don't recognize her. We never worked together. I was a metallurgist. She does vivimancy. I don't know nothing. And he's like, but I do remember there was this guy, Titus Bayard, and they were going to try fix his brain by putting, there was this healer, Elaine, and she was going to try use this thing called transmutation, where she took her brain, put it in his brain to try fix his brain injuries. So maybe you could do that with her. And they're like, oh man, maybe we will do that with her. And Morrow's like, I need her brain. I need to know what's in it. Send her to the High Reeve. He's my best animancer. He'll do this transmutation stuff. And so they're like, okay. And she's like, oh no, the High Reeve. Because like she meets someone named Penny, who's a girl from the resistance days. And Penny's like, Helena, you're alive? Oh my God. Don't mind the scars on my face. We do this so the guards will leave us alone because we're not pretty anymore. Because
which, for the record, does not actually work in real life.
No.
But, and she's also like, oh no, you don't know how bad things are now. If you donate an eye to their cause, they'll give you like food or safety or something like that.
And she also
it's like,
tells
it's
her,
real pathetic and grim dark. And like, that's one of the things about this is this book is trying real hard to be grim dark, and it feels more grim derp at times. Like this is a book that wants to be kind of horror-y and just never quite is able to make it work, I feel like.
And Penny's also like, oh, everything's been so bad. They killed Lila Bayard and had a body outside. And she basically tells her, and she's also like, the High Reeve is Morrow's like lead assassin. He's terrible. He's been hunting down the resistance one by one and killing them. And so you're like, oh no, the High Reeve's bad news. And so then when Morrow's like, send her to the High Reeve, he shall do this. Helena's like, oh no, I heard about the High Reeve. He's terrible. So they send her to the High Reeve's house, which is like in the country.
Well, no. First of all, we have like 2 chapters of her just sitting around being healed, and then they send her.
Yes. And then
you have no idea how lucky you are that we're going to summarize this plot and cut out a ton of bullshit.
Because the thing is, once I finish summarizing this, I'm going to describe to you what it was like actually reading it and some of the points at which, So I'm giving you.
You're gonna read the "I have no mouth and I must scream" monologue.
Yes,
Go
exactly.
Ahead.
And so they send her to the High Reeve, and the High Reeve is like, you're my prisoner, you're in this room. And the High Reeve's wife is this bitch named Aurelia, and Aurelia is like, ooh, I hate you. And she notices Helena has a really strong response to some red roses, and Aurelia's like, she doesn't like the color red, I shall dress her in red. Again, Handmaid's Tales coded. And the High Reeve has to come, and he has to do the transmutation. And the thing is, by putting his conscious into her brain, he sees a lot of her memories and stuff, and it also hurts her. Like, she starts having like strokes and stuff, so they have to do it slowly, kind of like building up a resistance to poison by doing a little bit at a time. And Stroud is popping in randomly to be like, yes, she's doing very well. And they also
it's
have
weirdly slice of life,
yes,
where like you're just going through the routine of a day, and like and you're like, okay, this is weird that we got into this groove.
Yeah, she has to go outside and walk, and then she has to come back in. She's scared of the dark, so he shows her how to use light switches, and like this, just a bunch of tiny interactions. Like, for every sentence I'm saying, it's like 10 scenes of little things that are repeating. Like, he takes her into the courtyard, she walks around the courtyard, she goes in, she's not being fed well. Like, there's all of these tiny things, and so like the amount of time it's going to take me to tell you the plot of this is very short. Of this entire book, it's very short, but it's so much. Don't let my description make you think that it is happening in a concise manner as I'm saying it, or like a thing that could have taken maybe 3 scenes to get the thing across took less than that.
If you want the real experience, put this video on 1/4 speed, and that's what listening to this book is like.
Yeah. And so and then Stroud's like, we think she's actually the animancer, that they had an animancer, and we think she has, animantic abilities. And also what you learn throughout all of this is that there's actually a repopulation program, because they're like, in the war, so many alchemists died, so we need more alchemists, so we need to start a breeding program to make sure we get more alchemists. But actually, they need the Helena, by just reading newspapers and paying attention to shit, is like, oh man. And she's had a couple interactions with Morrow, and she sees that he's kind of like not doing well, and every time she's seen him, he's doing worse. And she's like, Morrow's dying. The Undying are how he lives and supports himself, because there's someone randomly is just killing Undying, just with obsidian, just taking them out. And she's like, and he needs them to live. And the repopulation program is because he needs to get a body to put like, and I don't know if this all happens at the same time. I'm just going to give it to you.
Some of this happens later, yeah.
But I'm just going to give it to you. Morrow is dying, and he needs to put his consciousness, this whole transmutation process, this whole thing, into a new body. But unfortunately, if you are an alchemist, your mind goes into a new body. So they have these things called liches, where liches are people who take over dead bodies, but they're like fully conscious. So it is somebody else's living conscious in a dead body. But unfortunately, as a lich, you can only use whatever resonance that person had. So let's say you grew up your whole life as a pyromancer, but now you're in a body that only has iron resonance. You can only manipulate iron, and you didn't learn how to do that. So you're actually kind of shit at it. So, Morrow doesn't want to become a lich. He wants that good. He wants to get put into a body, like get the transmutation of someone who also has animancy and vivimancy, because that's what he has. And so they're like, the necromancer would like Helena to be part of the repopulation program. So we would like you, High Reeve, to become her. Like you have to be her stud. Otherwise, if it doesn't work after 2 months with you, we'll send her into the headquarters, and then random guys can just come and do whatever they want. And so everybody's like, ooh, not great. So then what you think happens.
By the way, yes, at this point, content warning. From this point out, we will be mentioning a word that rhymes with grape. We will not be saying that word because people find it annoying when we say that. We can't say the real word because it's YouTube. People find it annoying when we say grape, which I get. So we'll probably be saying assault, but I want to be very clear that it is not just assault. It is that other word that cannot be said. Yeah, because there should be no ambiguity on this point.
Yeah, it's the full Monty. It happens a couple of times. Oh, also, I should say, Helena's supposed to be sterilized to become a healer. So again, Eternal Flame, the power that was overthrown to let all of this happen, did not like vivomancers. No, no, no. They associated all vivomancy with necromancers unless you became a healer, in which case you had to commit to a life of celibacy and no children, so you couldn't spread the terrible power and like they considered it like a moral failing, and you couldn't spread that, but you committed yourself to good to be a healer. And she became a healer for the resistance and for the eternal flame, and so they sterilized her, so she should not be able to have kids. And there's a bunch of little scenes where Stroud comes in to check on her health, because Stroud is making sure that her brain is doing good, and that like she's not getting overtaxed. So like after the first transmutation thing, Stroud's like, you have to go slower, we're gonna only be able to do this once a month, so slow your roll. We can't have her, like, we don't want her to die because we need whatever's in her brain. And then slowly, like when Stroud's like, oh, it's a shame you couldn't be part of my repopulation program, Stroud just keeps messing with her like lower abdomen, and Helena's like, yeah, this is cool, I guess. And the whole time I'm like, dude, she's a vivomancer, she's repairing your sterilization, my girl. Like, but nothing. Woof, right over her head.
Weird she's doing it in the abdomen and not between the hips.
Yeah.
This joke will become clear later.
It will. And so then she's like, "Woo, you're not sterilized anymore. I did it. You're going in the repopulation program." And the thing is, like, we still want what's in her brain, but we think they think that by virtue of being that she's an animancer, and whatever access she has to her animancy is keeping her memories locked away and actively fighting against him whenever he's in her brain. And they think that if they get her, so on top of like they want a bebe for Moro to eventually take the body over, but they're also like, we think if she has to produce a bebe, that it will take her body will focus on the bebe and thus stop focusing on keeping those memories sealed, and thus we will have bebe and access to memories. 2 birds, 1 stone. High five, team. So again, the thing that you think has to happen for this to happen happens a couple of times. She gets pregnant and she's like, oh no, they're gonna hurt my baby. And he's like, no one's going to hurt your baby. And she's like, what do you mean? And then I forgot exactly what happened. There's a bunch of little things in here where
she
like
has Taco Bell, which makes her a little ill.
People keep trying to hurt her. Like Aurelia, his the High Reeve / Farron's wife, keeps attacking her, like fucking with her, and at one point like literally tries to gouge her eye out, and she has to coach like Farron, like she literally pops the eye out of the socket, and Farron has to help her like heal, because he's a vivomancer on top of all of his shit, and has to get like her eye put back in. The other thing I have to say is like, originally when they were in school, Farron's hair was dark, but now he's all white and his hair is like a white silver. What happened to him? What did the Undying do to him? What has been happening? And throughout her staying here and all of this stuff happening, Moro has been torturing him. And at first she doesn't notice, but then she kind of starts putting it together, and she starts paying attention to shit. And she's like, Moro's torturing you. And he was like, yes, he was not pleased with this thing that happened, but I don't see why you should care. You suck. And she's like, why is he torturing? Why is Moro torturing him? And so she like puts together a bunch of things, and she gets to that whole thing like, a bunch of the Undying that are no longer being mentioned in the newspaper are being killed, aren't they? And he's like, how did you figure that out? And she's like putting stuff together, and like there's also this thing that happens where like her body feels safe around him, where like terrible things will happen, and she'll be like, man, I wish Farron was here. Or he'll come in and she'll like take a step toward him, and she's also like, god damn my terrible body, I hate this. Why would it do this to me? And there's this point after their terrible after the assault.
Well, we should talk a little bit, and then we'll talk about that specifically. So a couple of things to note. First of all, you may have noticed from this how passive a character she is. She doesn't really do anything. She puts together those two things, and then there's no small acts of betrayal. There's no small acts of rebellion. There's no small acts of trying to take control of her life. It's all just very like...
The only thing she is trying to do is she keeps trying to find things to kill herself with.
Yes, and failing somehow. And so the other thing to note is that all of the necromancers are just absolutely awful people. Like, they talk about, like, doing the worst things to other people, torturing them. At one point, there's a necromancer party where they're all like, oh, yeah. Hoo-hoo, I brought 3 families of the rebels here, and we're gonna have a long time to have fun with them. And the High Reeve is like, are we? And he immediately breaks their necks. And you're like, well, shit. So, okay, we have cartoon villains, which, if you're taking the context that these were once an underprivileged class, that's a little weird, but whatever, we won't talk about it. And the fact that they're now torturing the upper class, but then again, we won't talk about that. And so it's weird because you simultaneously know that the High Reeve is going to be the love interest, even if you didn't already know he's Draco Malfoy. Because there's even a couple parts where him and Helena actually flirt like a touch, and also he's good looking and a male, and like this
and
is that
it's the only character that's nearby.
Yeah, and part of her routine, so that's going to happen. But at the same time, he's real awful to her, and he's just a bad person. He's hunting down resistance members and killing them, and then again he just murders 3 innocent people for no reason. And he also keeps doing the thing where he's like, when his wife goes crazy on her, he's like, get away from her, you bitch. She's mine to take care of, or mine to possess, or whatever.
The high necromancer gave her to me. She is my property. And then you're also like, we're using the word my and mine a lot, buddy. So you're immediately, and like there's also a scene where like she gets injured and he's like massaging her hands in a very specific, familiar way. You're immediately like, oh, whatever is being held up, because like at first you're like, obviously what's in her brain is that there might be someone from the resistance/rebellion who's still alive, and she had to like cordon off these memories, and she kept specifically not remembering this one like the Ron analog, and I was like, I wonder if he's still alive. And one of the things that's, because like I assumed that they were gonna like fall in love, and originally when I started during the like capture, like during this station, and that maybe her and the Soren analog had like a thing in the past. He's still alive, so Soren is the Ron analog, that her and Soren actually like maybe had a thing in the past, and he was going to be betrayed, that she was now in love with this shitty person, and who blah 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 blah, whatever. But very quickly put it together. No, that is not what's going to happen. Whatever she is hiding, Farron's probably involved. There's a scene where he gets drunk on the night of abeyance, where magic is weaker. And he gets drunk, and she comes in, like she finds him in this room kind of sad drinking alone, and he kisses her, and her body reacts and he reacts. And also, please note, this is post assault. But it's this like terrible, like she's like, her body seems to want this thing. He is kissing her very hungrily, and there's this idea that like there's something here, and but then she pulls away, and she's like, oh my god, and she like hates herself and hates her body, and she's very upset that this has happened, because again, worst of the worst shit guy. He keeps rescuing her, but like that's his job. He's supposed to take care of her and not let something happen to her, because like all of these reasons. And there's a scene where he literally says, oh, you're just a sad, like the holdfasts use you, everyone use you, you're alone, and you'll cling to whatever sense of comfort you can find, and you've put that on me, kind of thing. And it's just real shit. Like the first like chunk of this book is just a slog of like shitty little scenes that you have to get through. One of the other things,
the book also wants to make you sympathize with. Okay, so here's the thing: the book, on the one hand, will say like, "Oh no, we're not trying to." Farron, is not a good guy, but then the book also does the thing where it's like, but he has a lot of reasons for not being good. And the thing about it is they're real fucking stupid. So after the assault, he immediately vomits, and then he does it again, which feel like outsized reactions, like the author really needed to get across. This is like after the first time somebody kills somebody else in a book, they always vomit.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's kind of cliche. That's like a cliched shorthand for the person is disgusted. But you're supposed to be like, oh, okay. And he was really backed into this corner of like, you got to do this or it's going to be a bunch of random guys kind of a thing. And then also there's him being tortured by Morrow, which happens a lot throughout the book and all the timelines. It's so fucking stupid because it does not really have a plot reason. There is no reason that Morrow should be torturing him. You could take that out and the plot doesn't change. The only reason it's there is so that you feel sympathy for him, that you feel like, oh, he is also a victim. And it's literally just used as an excuse and as a way to sympathize him and a way to add moral ambiguity that isn't actually moral ambiguity. It's just a sleight of hand to make you feel bad for him. It's completely extraneous and it's cheap.
Yeah, and it's a lot of things where like they'll torture him. He'll have to take time to like recoup and stuff. So he's an undying, so he can't die. Anytime something really shitty happens, like if his arm gets chopped off, he'll grow it back, kind of thing. But Will's right. There's a lot of, especially in this first chunk where he was like, oh, he was mad about this other thing that I actually had nothing to do with. So he tortured me. And it's supposed to be like, wow, Morrow's so terrible. And you didn't deserve. And there's even a point where she was like, neither of us deserve that. There's also this point where like there's this guy who's like really obsessed with Helena. Like he's sleeping with Farron's wife, like this dude.
Yeah, Alistair, I think.
No, maybe Alistair was his first. No, it was
I completely got it wrong. Never mind. Keep going.
Yeah, I'm blanking on what it was, but he's kind of like Lancaster. Yeah, I think it was Lancaster.
Yes, you're right, Lancaster.
This guy named Lancaster, and Lancaster's like, "You don't remember me?" And she's like, "I don't fucking know you." And he's like, and he during a party, he tries to like kidnap Helena, and then Farron is like, "No, no, no, on God," and like literally, this guy is also undying, but he like disembowels him, but he's still alive. Like everything's connected, but it's all like outside. And then he takes Helena back in, and then later he kills Lancaster. Like he kills Lancaster in front of people in a hospital, and and then it kind of comes out because like the identity of the High Reeve had been hidden, but then it comes out that who the High Reeve is, and now everybody knows it's him, which it doesn't really have consequences for this first part of the book, and only ends up happening because it needs to happen for this thing in the second half to happen. You could have, outside of what it does to his reputation and what it's going to do to his reputation after this is all over, it doesn't really have a huge significance within the book for his identity to come out. It's gonna have impact later as far as emotional impact for some shit that happens, but it really like it's one of those things where you could take it out and like outside of tweaking some stuff at the end, it really doesn't have a huge impact. But yeah, so there's a bunch of little scenes with the two of them interacting, and there's moments that are kind of like, ooh, intense. And then and then he's like, oh no, terrible. And she's like, oh, I hate this. And like her fear of the dark and all this stuff, all these things are happening, but it basically ends with her like having a stroke. She gets ill after she gets pregnant, and there's a moment of random like flashes of dialogue that you realize are memories, and throughout all of this she's been getting some random memories back that she didn't remember, like as kind of almost as dreams, but the context of them are completely devoid. And then we enter part 2, which is the very, very, you think it's going to be like a short flashback because we've gotten short little flashback scenes as she remembers things. But no, we're just going to get their entire history. So the book, which is like working towards what, you're not quite sure, it just stops. And we're just shunted back like 4 years. I don't even remember how long. Back to during the war when Helena is working in the hospitals. And like how she's going to come into contact with Kane Farron in that. Now, before we get into that part 2, because it lasts so long, it is the majority of the book. If you're here for actual like Handmaid Tales shenanigans, you're not going to get it because what I've given you has been the Handmaid Tales portion, and it is literally the shortest portion of the book. I mean, maybe the end part, like part 3 is the shortest, but like it is so like tacked on to this larger story that's happening in the middle. And so we just stop and go back. Before we do that, I need to explain the info dumps. Unless you have something you'd like to say, Will.
I have, but info dumps first.
Yeah. So throughout all of this, what I've been telling you, her interacting with when she was at the headquarters with Stroud and Morrow, and her going to Kane's house randomly in the middle of the scene, like there'll be a conversation will be happening about her fate. It'll end, and then she'll just think. And as she's thinking, she info dumps stuff about the world. And what she's telling you doesn't actually have anything to do with the scene that just happened, or that is about to happen, or that is currently happening. It is her just thinking about things and letting you know. And it's kind of like the book is trying to fill in between things context for the rest of the book. And Will's completely correct. The way to do this is to do it well, is to do it where whatever is happening in the scene is related to this. And so as the scene is unfurling, you are getting bits of the information, either through dialogue or her remembering something. Like somebody says something and she was like, oh yeah, what happened to this thing? Or I thought all the ironworks had been destroyed in the end of the war. Do they have them working? And then, maybe then we get a little thing about the history of the ironworks in the city. That's not how the info dumps work. It'll just be a scene of someone being like, hey, we should get into her brain. And then she'll be like, I remember the Institute, and they brought me from Etris, and they trained me, and then it has nothing to do with what's happening around it, but you're just stopping for like a 2 to 5 minute. And I listened at 1.7 speed, but when I read it, because I read and listened to this, I would go up to 2.2 to try get through this. And so it was still taking like a good couple of minutes to just get through whatever info dump about the history of alchemy. You get some stuff in this.
There's one goddess. Is one I specifically remember being like, why do we need to know about this?
Lumithia and Lumia, they're the two moons that they're goddesses, and how in Etris they actually thought this other one was really nice, but here they think the other one's better, and blah blah blah. And again, it has nothing to do with what is happening in the scene. It's not like there's something to ground you in it, or that it's coming up naturally, or anything like that. And unfortunately, by virtue of having what is she has obviously thought through how she was going to take this from the author has thought through a lot of how they were going to take this from the HP world to their fic world, because I guarantee you there was a lot of things that they had to change just to get to the fic version, and lore and change, because it's a fundamentally different thing. And what I don't know is if there was a Palladia equivalent, if it was a city state that they were doing. So I don't know. I haven't actually read the fic.
But me neither. I read part of it, which I will tell you about in a little bit, but go ahead.
And so you don't know how much was things that were changed from the HP world to the fic just by virtue of it being an AU. And then from that AU to here. And unfortunately, the author has to kind of shove in these bits to impart to you the context of the world, where if it had been, and also by virtue of having their main character so isolated, and the setting being this one house and just these 3 or 4 characters coming in and out, there is no way to organically learn information about the world, because essentially it's functioning as a weird slice of life with the daily routines of all of this shit, and the personal interactions that are happening. So there's no way. So the Helena just stops and remembers shit. You're just constantly stopping for Helena. And during the scenes, I just imagined her zoning out and thinking about all this shit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are we doing? What's happening? And it doesn't work. And I can tell that this author tried to craft an interesting world. What they obviously put time into this, but unfortunately, give it to us
reads
differently.
A lot it reads a lot like 14-year-old fantasy world that they want to tell you all about.
Yeah.
And I think this goes back to the fanfic origins as a problem. First of all, again, none of this is important because none of this actually impacts the plot, because the plot has not changed. Again, this is all added on stuff. You, by definition, do not need it. Secondly, the author has no experience on how to info dump gracefully, because that's not a thing you need to do in fan fiction. The few times you do info dump in fan fiction. It's about characters or events that the reader inherently finds interesting because they or have already have a connection to them, and they're figuring out how things are like different. They're not like re-explaining what something is like. Like it is a very different. It is one of the ways that fanfic is a very different mode of writing, and so the author just doesn't have any experience with it, and they're not good at it. They're not good at it. They don't know how to do it. Um, and so I think that's the real problem with it. And it's going to just be awful throughout the whole book.
And we do get to a point where like the book stops doing the random info dumping. We still get info dumping, but it will have a bit more after after part 1. It will tie in a bit better into the what's happening in the scenes, but also it's still just a lot of info, and eventually we just get to the point where the book doesn't have to info dump at us anymore because it did so much before, and so you can kind of just go from there, and it is a welcome reprieve when that finally begins to stop. But it just makes this first part so hard to get through. And I'm also going to make the argument that by virtue of we have 2 timelines, the present, what is happening post Helena waking up from stasis chamber, and we have the past. They do not take up equal amounts of time in the book. The past portion is a huge chunk of the book. Like if you came into this thinking it was going to be like a dark romance in a Handmaiden's Tale-esque setting, it's not. The actual romance is spy handler coming from different backgrounds and getting to know each other in the like heart of a bitter war. That's the actual romance. Again, if you came in on a Handmaid's Tale, no, that's not what this romance is. The beginning is going to pretend, but no, the majority of this book is going to be what happened in the past, and it just doesn't work because
structurally the problem is that this functions as a en media res, as they say, which is, you know, a little bit to tease you at the beginning before you get started on the story. But the problem is that it takes too long. It's just, structurally speaking, it lasts a little too long, and it's also in the mode of
a little. Way too long. Way too long.
It lasts too long. And it also falls into slice of life, which is like, that's not getting us, we think that's normal, and so it feels even longer because nothing exciting is happening, and then we flash back. And the thing is, I kept expecting the flashback to end literally for the first half of the flashback, and I need to explain to you guys that it goes on till 85% of the book.
And I'm just gonna double check where part 2 starts. So chapter 22.
Yes.
Give me 1 second. I am going to go back to chapter 20.
I will just say while she's doing that you may be like, well, you know, if it feels right for the book, why are you having to follow the rules? Okay, the thing is that as a reader, you have certain expectations from a book because reading and stories are really kind of a language between the author and the reader to communicate ideas. And so in your cultural context, based off of other stories you have read, you find certain plot structures interesting and certain ones not interesting and not engaging. So like, I'm making up these numbers, but like the inciting incident has to happen by like 10% of the way through the book or whatever. That is something that we find interesting, and the stories we like best have those. That can vary by culture, obviously. You know, it just can. Maria had mentioned how you know, in Western romances, there's always the third act breakup, and apparently in Korean TV dramas, there's always halfway through a switch to angst of why they can't be together, which seems to just be a cultural thing that they find enjoyable. That recurrently happens. And so the problem here is that this doesn't follow that pattern. It's too long. You don't fall into the second half.
Yep. So to put it in perspective, because generally there's been a thing that says by 30% the plot should kick in. Like by 30, like maximum before your story is on the way to starting, because you don't want too little happening to ground you into what the character's life is like, and you want to get to know the character before bad shit starts happening. But generally by 30% max, you need to get the horse on the road. When you have a very, 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 very long book, 30%, and so I just checked, by the time part 2 starts, you're 27% of the way through the book, and you might be thinking, Maria, you just said 30%, my girl. That's appropriate. 10 hours. It is 10 hours into the book. I just checked. I put it back to 1 point speed. Okay? I went to chapter 22 and there's 26 hours left. 26 hours and 40 minutes. So we're looking at 9 hours 20, okay? Not 10. I shall amend for full accuracy. That is the length of entire other novels. So you as the reader think this is what the book is. You have been here for so long. It's not just been an hour or two that you're kind of like getting the feel of the book and then we're going to kind of jump off. You have been here for 9 hours and 20 fucking minutes existing in this world. So when the flashback starts, you're like, when are we going to get back to that shit? And the bebe, you know, and what's going to happen? Is Moro going to get the bebe? Because like I thought that was going to be more of like a plot, like this push and pull, maybe him, you know, evaluating the, you know, like all that. No, you are stuck for the next, I will tell you when the,
it's 85% of the way through the book. I remember because I looked at it and I was like, I need to remember this for the review because this is so painful. And the other thing is, most end media res openings are like a chapter or like the James Bond action sequence that lasts 5 minutes before the credits roll.
Yeah.
Like usually this actually does not even last that long.
It does not. So the flashback ends with 6 hours left of the book. Okay, which means that literally the majority of this 36-hour behemoth is this flashback, and you're just sitting there waiting the whole time to eventually get to the, like, when are we going to get there? And it just, and at a certain point you realize, oh my God, we're nowhere close based on context clues. And you're like, I guess this is just where we live now. And you can also like flip to the content, the table of contents and go, okay, part 2 lasts literally forever.
It really hurts the first part of the flashback too, because you keep being like, all right, let's hurry this up. Yep. I've already got the information I need from this. Let's get to the part of back to the actual plot of the book. And so it's very unsatisfying in that way.
It really is. And unfortunately, I think what would have worked much better, would have been harder to pull off, but I think would have worked way better for the reader, is to interplay the two timelines a bit more, where we started getting, because like there's a couple of moments where she's getting bits of her memory back, like I mentioned, where he'll do the transmutation thingy and then she'll like get a memory, like she gets a memory of Lila being like, I'm sorry Helen, I did something terrible. Or she has a memory of Luke smoking opium and she was like, Luke didn't smoke opium, where the fuck's Soren? And stuff like that. And you're kind of like, ooh, is Soren Ron? I guess so. Like, and as you're, but I think hitting the flashback point and then having set chapters that happened in the past and we come to the future, and it is kind of as if Helena is subconsciously learning these memories, but she's not fully, like, almost as she sleeps, she's living through the memories. And we start, and what it would have done is it would have started giving us context that she doesn't in the present know. So doing that very interesting thing where the reader suddenly knows more than the character does. And you're able to watch things. You have more context than she does. So if Kane does something, you're like, oh, that's why he's doing that. My girl, Helena, you don't know, you know, like, and now suddenly we're in on it. You know, we're in on the thing, but we're still
You're engaged. You're an active reader versus a passive
and we're still getting forward momentum. So going back and forth. And I'm not saying like a ton of stuff, but I think we needed to do some interplay where these two timelines were happening at the same. And there's been plenty of books that have done this. There have been plenty of books that have played with two timelines, and you switch back perspectives to kind of understand.
I think she needed to pick, or they needed to pick. I think the author needed to pick which one they wanted. I'm going to be real. The author, again, I read some interviews with them because I was just like, how does a monstrosity like this come to be? Like, I need to understand like, women are obsessed with like serial killers and documentaries. I was like, how does something this horrible happen? And the thing about it is they said that the easiest thing to be would have been to cut this up into a trilogy of books, which kind of makes sense. If you
it would have made way more sense.
And I actually think that's totally true. I think you write the flashbacks as book 1 and the present day time as book 2. And
I disagree. I think you start with like an actual chunk that is the present. Book 2 is the flashbacks. And then book 3 picks us back up. I think that could work as well. I think also maybe just don't write the book. I think that would be good. And the other thing we have to note about this structural issue of what the author is focusing on, which is the spy versus spy, or spy, love and spy, spy x spy, spy handler.
spy handler, is what it does to the Handmaid's Tale element of this book. Now, we kind of have to talk about that, because the thing about it is that I think the way the author explains it is basically they were watching the first episode of The Handmaid's Tale, and when they get to the bedroom room, the author was like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if one of them was a spy and had to do this thing, but was at the time like there's more going on. And I understand this. This is how almost all fiction happens, is you're thinking about another story and then you kind of start doing your own thing with it. And in fan fiction, it's they used to call them plot bunnies if you're from a time period that's very cringe. And it's just like, in fanfic, it's okay. Fanfic to me is, and I don't see this as hate. I mean, I've talked about this before, but not as much on the channels. I used to read a lot of fan fiction, and I actually used to write quite a bit. And so for me,
and fanfic they were good.
Thank you.
He had fans.
I did. I did pretty well for myself.
Yeah, you did.
And the thing is that for me, fanfic is kind of like creative effluence. It's kind of just your creative mind, the natural output of it. You don't even necessarily have control over it. It's just like an aura that comes off of you. Again, effluence is the correct word for that. And you can't necessarily always be held accountable either for what it is or for it to be good. And so I get that as a writer, the author, was just like, okay, what happens next? And then they halfway through, they were like, well, actually, the part of this I find interesting is this. I get that. When it comes to publication, though, they should have cut the Handmaid's Tale element, because it is not important to the plot. It is not important to the plot, and it is also a thing where it is in there for shock value. So when you're going to do something really dark, you need to make sure you're doing it for good reasons and you're trying to say something with it. That's like, neither me or Maria have read The Handmaid's Tale, but we understand that Atwood is doing a critique of religiosity, patriarchy, totalitarianism, and the role of the handmaids, which in that is that like some women are infertile, and so a handmaid is brought in to bear the child for the man, and like that is and it's biblically called a handmaid or whatever. That is a commentary on how women's bodies are controlled by men. Right? And how ideas of fertility are important and they're objectified.
And that women can become part of, by making the stratas between the different roles you can have, just like with any subjugation structure, you divide the people that you want to subjugate into different stratas to make people that are part of the strata you're subjugating part of the subjugation. And
middle managers, yes, as they call them. Yeah, and that's a point that she is making and interrogating in the book. This book is not doing that. This book is having it in there because that's where the author's idea originally started and because they like the shock value of it. So in the original fanfic, and I was reading the beginning part of it, and I was shocked when we got to... Let me actually upload this very quickly. Maria, vamp for a second.
I had an actual point I was going to make.
Oh, Maria, you silly woman.
But Will's really right.
Okay. So here we are in this part. It's from the original fanfic, and it reads, "My lord," the mind healer said, stepping hesitantly closer. "Healer Stroud has brought to my attention a point that may interest you." Maria, yes. Voldemort's interest appeared negligible. He did not look up toward the other healer. "Magical pregnancy, my lord," Healer Stroud said with a proud smile. "There are a few cases on record which indicate that such pregnancies have an ability to break through magical fugues. The magic of a child is compatible, but dissimilar enough to its mother's to have a corroding effect on built-up magic. It's nothing conclusive given the rarity. It's possible, however, Miss Granger has exceptional magical abilities. You yourself said this and wanted her included in the repopulation effort." So from the beginning, this was a story where that is like such a paper-thin fig leaf of a reason to have the Handmaid's Tale element. And so from the beginning, this story, that element of the story was just an excuse. It is not an organic part of the world building to interrogate a theme.
Yes. And it really does function where if you removed that portion, like if Helena is never assaulted, there is no pregnancy, the rest of the book can function exactly the same. Exactly. There's this point where like the child, like they're we're gonna get some flashes in the like denouement portion of the book where like the child is grown. You could have just have them had a child later, you know, like Stroud could have attempted to fix her sterilization, but you never had to have the assault stuff. And then all the, because like there's some specific things that happen with the child that we're gonna like talk about later, and how it interplays to who he is and who she is, and their positions in the war. And you could have just had that with like a normal ass kid that they wanted to have. Like it did not have to happen. Like when I tell you the assault, the pregnancy is so vestigial, because like all of the, because there's this point later where they're like, we have to take care of her for the pregnancy, and you could have just continued with the we have to take care of her because we need what's in her brain. And the only thing it does do is there's a point where they stop looking into her brain because of the pregnancy. And I'm like, we just could have cut it and made it so much shorter. The amount of time we had to spend there, that like this all could have happened, and it could have been so much shorter. So you really could have removed that. And the way the story functions, because again, that huge chunk of the book that I told you about, because again, 9 hours, 20 minutes, the stuff that's happening now, 6 hours at the end. That's it. The rest of the 36-hour book is the romance. None of that has anything to do with the handmaids. It has nothing to do with a repopulation program. It has nothing to do with un bébé. It has nothing to do
patriarchy, nothing to do with that.
Nothing to do with any of that at all. And when I tell you, this book is so like, there's points where it's like, yeah, we can't have girls do certain things, but but there's also already girls doing stuff. Like the paladin primary is a woman, and she's the first woman, but like they're still letting her do it. So then there's points when the book's like, wow, women aren't treated that well. And I'm like, there are women in almost every position of power. Like the way the world is built and what the book is trying to pretend it's saying, because like the book will be like, wow, women don't get to do as much stuff as men. But like the person who is supporting, so like Luke becomes principate, and his, what is that, regent equivalent? Yeah, it's McGonagall, but his regent equivalent is his aunt, who's a woman who gets to be his regent until he comes of age, and his head advisor and like the head of the resistance. There's a lot of women in positions where you're like, Stroud with the Undying is one of the head scientists who's given a lot of like liberty to do the shit she wants. Like, and so the entire time the book doesn't actually feel like it's interrogating that, outside of what it does for brief moments to the character. Because like there's points where Helen is like, wow, people don't like me, I'm a vivamancer and a girl. And outside of those moments, the book really isn't engaging with any of that. So Will is completely correct when he tells you that. I cannot tell you how easy it would have been to cut that out, because the main romance portion, that huge chunk, doesn't engage with it at all, even a little bit. There is more discussion about the class issues between the holdfasts being this legacy, basically monarchy, this biological monarchy through a patriarchal lineage, and the fact that the guilds have tension with them and their religious views that make them see vivimancers bad. There's more given to that than there is to anything about women and men within the book.
It's real weird. It feels like the author just kind of included it because they thought it should be that. Well, actually, we'll talk about why they actually included it, and it has to do with a certain religious figure that is not, you feel much better about after you get through part of the book, and that won't make a lot of sense, but it will later if you remember this. I'm trying to make Maria smile, but I don't think she remembers the reference I made.
I do not remember the reference.
I'll bring it up. It's it has to do with Jesus. So that's the problem with this part of the book. Again, that's the problem with the Handmaid's Tale element of it. I think it's like Maria said, it's vestigial. It should have been cut. Really, this book could be better if somebody who hadn't read Harry Potter had read it and was like, why is that in there?
Yeah. And
take that out.
And honestly, what it feels like is that the author started writing this book, like started writing the fic from the inception point of a Handmaid's Tale fic, and then got into the flashback, and then actually wrote the story got away from
That was
her.
what they were interested in.
Yeah, because it happens sometimes where you start a book and you think it's going to be A, but as you're writing it, it becomes something else entirely, and then you have to rework the beginning because it no longer matches where the book ended up going. And in a fic, that happens a lot of times. There's a lot of back, and I didn't read nearly as much. And when I tell you nearly, I mean, if I read this many, Will and Katie were like, we're off the screen.
Each of us.
Each of them. Just like not even collectively, just a massive amount. But even within the fics I read, a lot of the longer ones would start at point A, and then by the end, and because it's being released chapter by chapter, and you have to wait for the story to get given to you, and one of the things I don't think people realize is that when something is serialized and you've gotten used to reading it as it gets released, even when you read the completed fic, you are used to the rhythm of the fic. You are used to how, because like,
that's part of what I mean when I say fanfic is a different genre, a mode of reading. Is there's different expectations there.
It really is, because when you get it like a chapter at a time, you're just kind of rolling with it. It's why sometimes you watch some of those older TV shows like House, where they would release an episode a week. You would just watch that episode, enjoy the thing, walk away. But if you ever try like binge those, you're like, there's so much repetition happening here, and you watching it in a binge model doesn't work as well versus shows that are designed to be binged, which have a completely different way of telling the story with much less of the problem of the week or murder of the, like whatever the case was for those shows that were designed to be a lot of episodes that you got once at a time and you just had to process and move on from.
Or even the episode keeps reminding you about things that happened before, because in the days before VHS or DVD box sets, there was no guarantee that you actually remembered the thing that happened or had watched it if you weren't there that Saturday.
Yeah,
exactly. Like you may just not have known about it.
Yeah, so fan fiction has that to it, where there's going to be elements and types of scenes, because with a fan fiction, you want these characters to interact and do the thing. So a bunch of scenes over and over where the characters are doing things and having small movements of growth happening is fine when you're getting it a week at a time. But even if you read a fic that is fully complete, as I mentioned, you've gotten so used to that mode.
Rhythm.
That rhythm that you don't even mind when it is this one giant fic, because you are aware of how a fic works and how the rhythm goes. I am years out of my, like, being used to reading fan fiction. Years. I have not read one, God, in like 10 years? I briefly mentioned maybe trying to
do you even live?
Exactly. I briefly mentioned trying to do maybe some spinning silver fic, like reading some. It hasn't happened. I'm a busy girl. I have to read a lot for this podcast.
I like a year ago bookmarked some Anjin Fuji fic from Shogun, and I still haven't gotten around to reading it, even though the first paragraphs were like actually quite promising. There's like two I keep up with.
There's no time. Again, Will made me read this, and previous to that, he made me read Sword of Kaigen, which was also a long book. There's just
You're welcome. Join the Patreon, so it's not for nothing.
But so I'm so far removed from that mode of reading and that language to reading that this was just so hard to get through, because I'm like, we had a scene almost exactly like this. Why are we doing this exact scene again? Why am I being badgered over the head with this? And it's why I think as a fan fiction, it makes sense why this was so beloved. You know, within the world of fan fiction, there's a lot of bad writing and a lot of stuff. And so if you're looking for something new, you're feeling a little spicy and dark, and you want something long, because I've been there, guys, where you're just like, ugh, everything's like a one shot. Can I please have something with some character development? And then you find this and you're like, nom nom, this is my pairing, this is my ship, this is what I want that. And also, this is not my pairing. I while I read HP when I was younger, I never really was into the fandom at all.
I gotta talk about how No, I'll talk about that in a little bit because we should keep going with the plot for a little
Yes.
bit, just intermittently. Okay, so in the present timeline or past timeline, Helena is a healer for the Resistance. They call themselves the Resistance, even though they were the dominant power. I don't
And
know why.
they
That's
still
weird.
are. They still are the dominant power. Like technically, Morrow is the rebellion, and they are the dominant power, still trying to scrounge and hold on to power. Nobody is one, so they are the dominant. They're not the
Also,
resistance. They're the eternal flame.
the world is fucking bizarre because we will never really understand why they fight the way they do. They seem to fight in very crowded urban environments, which doesn't make sense. I mean, they have lorries and cars, but they don't have like guns. It makes sense if this is Harry Potter and there's a bunch of muggles around and this is a secret war, but it makes no sense for a world that's supposed to be its own and this is an international struggle. And it's one of the ways the book just feels completely weird and like the author just took a vacation. But anyway, she's a healer, but you know what? People don't really respect healers. This will become a running theme. Because they don't like fight or something.
And also vivimancy bad. And one of the things we start with, like one of the first things we get in this flashback is Luke and Lila fighting with Soren, because Soren and Lila are both paladins to sworn to protect Luke, and they're all fighting, and Helena's had a hard shift, and she goes to the council meeting even though Luke's not there, and she's like, guys, the war has been going on for like 4 or 5 years at this point. We're all tired. We're running out of people. They're going to win. I think we should use necromancy to fight them. So we stop sending living people, because she's like, I've been in the trenches of the hospital. We keep sending people out. I heal them. They come back. I keep sending them out.
You guys don't understand because you go out into battle, which is different, which is a fucking bizarre take that the author will stick to. But go ahead.
And also, just like we don't have enough people, and if I know we don't want to, but we have to make hard decisions. So I think we should do this. And everyone's like, "Oh my god, you whore! Why would you say that?" Because I have to explain a little bit of religious lore, if you will. Okay. One of the things about this world and the original Principate, his name was Orion Holdfast, and he was just the best boy that ever happened. And there was the evil necromancer that he fought with, and the necromancer was like, ooh, vivimancy, necromancy, and Holdfast was like, no, that is impure. We shan't use it. I shall stick to my golden morals and religious fervor. And then the gods rewarded him and smote the high necromancer from the earth in a miracle, that because Holdfast was so held fast.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Because he held fast to his principles, his belief, and he did not get to the same level as that stinky necromancer. The gods just smote him and got rid of him, and it was a blessed triumph ordained by the gods. And so there's this prevailing idea in the planning of the resistance. Again, they're still the main, they were the status quo. There's a rebellion happening to overthrow them, but they're not. But with the eternal flame, we'll say, is that we cannot do anything. Like we can't do anything that is really terrible, because then the gods, we shall forsake the gods, and the gods will not provide the miracle. There's this idea that like, as long as they persevere and they suffer and they're good, that eventually the gods will smote and the miracle will happen and the war will end. To the point that, and the thing is, they cannot use necromancy. It's there and it would be easy to do so, but they can't. Otherwise they will lose the war, and because they will have tainted their souls. And so everybody's like, how dare you, Helena, that you would even say that, you whore. And they were like, thank God Luke wasn't here. And everybody's like, Helena, I think we're going to take you off some of your duties, and you're not going to get to do stuff because you said something so sacrilegious. And people are like, this is what happens when you bring a foreigner in with their weird foreign other, because like her religion and like her views of the gods are different. Like they just have some fundamental differences, because from different places, I guess. And they're like, this one could never get how good our guy is. Like, wrong.
So she's not just a woman. She's not just a vivimancer, but she's also foreign. So yes. Three types of bigotry she's dealing with.
And she wants to do necromancy. whore. And
Yeah.
then eventually she gets like reprimanded, and they won't let her see Luke anymore because of what she said, and they're also hiding it from him that she said this thing, so they keep not letting her hang out with him. But then after this happens, there's this guy named Jan Kauper and Ilva Holdfast. This is our Snape analog and our McGonagall analog. In this, Jan Kauper is one of the professors at the school. He's a pyromancer, but his one arm was damaged when he was younger, and he doesn't have use of it anymore. So he mainly just does instruction. And then Ilva is Luke's aunt, her great aunt, and after his father died, his father was killed by Cain Farron, who ripped his heart out on the steps of the institute. But after his father died, he took over his principate, and Ilva became his thing. But the two of them were like, Helena, I know we just berated you publicly, but we see that you've got the wherewithal to do the shit that needs to be done. We don't think you should do that. And Cowper, especially, Jan is like super anti anything like that. His family was killed by necromancy, so he's like, fuck them all. And he'll do like other shitty shit to like, he's not one of the ones who's like, I must remain good on paper and da-da-da. He's just anti necromancy to the point where he'll do plenty of other bad stuff in pursuit of that. And Ilva's like, we've decided to we're not going to let you do necromancy, but we have an offer for you. So someone from the Undying has reached out to us and wants to be a spy for us. His name is Cain Farron. And she's like, oh yeah, I went to school with that guy. I didn't really know him that much. He was in the guilds. Guild people didn't really hang out with like us sponsored students because they hated us. But we competed academically. Here's one of the other funny things that is just so and I don't know if this is a fic trope, but like, because like within different fandoms and within specific ships, there becomes a fanon associated with that ship and kind of the lore around it. And one of the things about the original HP is that Draco was kind of this pathetic bully character who was kind of a foil to the actual evil, where he's so, in the larger grand scheme of things, inconsequential and ineffectual and just pathetic. Like, he is just a pathetic character.
Okay, here's the thing, and this is one of the reasons Cain Farron was very weak for me for at least the first half of the book. Draco is a pathetic character whose role in the book is to contrast the real evil. He is a bully, he is privileged, but in the fanon, he was abused. That's the thing that they tend to go to, and that's not true in canon at all, because... Yeah, I said fanon canon. Yeah, because he just isn't. He's a privileged kid from a racist family of white eugenicists, essentially, or not, but magic eugenicists. But in fic, he's always very funny and he smirks, and also he has dark issues behind him. And it's so hard to take Cain Farron seriously.
Yeah, and he's competent, like on Helena levels of competence. And one of the things that and again, this is one of the ways where you can be like, see, they changed the book from the original, which, like, totally fair. It's just, the reason I mentioned this is not actually as a critique, but to ask those of you who were part of the Dramione fandom,
please don't comment or read or watch our videos.
No, I'm sure there's plenty of people that this was not there, but was it like the done thing to make him competent and like smart and like good at shit? Like, was that part of the fanon? Was like, that's how, or was he, because like he always just felt like a middle of the road student, like he wasn't actually like really good at shit.
No, he isn't. He's not that smart, but you're right. So I think that's part of the...
I'm asking, is that part of that? Question for you guys. Let me know if you're still watching this.
I should also say, I think Val read some to... Yeah, I hate to admit something horrible about her character like that, but I think she read some Dramione.
Yeah. So Val, let us know. But Yeah, so he's and he's
Oh,
part
so
of
he
the
wants to turn. Yeah, he
yeah,
wants to turn spy for them, but they don't. They thought his first reason was stupid.
stupid.
So then he gave them the real reason, which is that he wants Helena,
Yeah. And
all of her, now and
forever.
after the
And
war.
it's such a weird. Let me tell you,
It's
this whole
so
thing is
fucking
so
stupid.
weird.
It's
It is.
very. I got sold to One Direction.
Yeah, it is. It's exactly that because he's originally like, I want to avenge my mother. And they were like, your mother died of natural causes, silly. And instead of being like, no, guys, this is what happened. He tortured my mother for, I mean, if you'd like to use, I can animance the memories into your brain if you'd like to see it, because I'm a literal fucking animancer. Like, this is what happened. Instead of that, he's like, oh, they will want a way to control me. So if they think I want something, they'll work with me. So I'm going to pretend. And he just pulled an inconsequential, ineffectual name out of a hat. And he was like, Helena, the girl I used to compete with for high scores, but we never ever actually interacted. She's part of the resistance. I'll say I want her. And the thing is, they say he wants you now. And what does that mean? He wants you as
They do that a lot.
a cleaner. He wants you as a romantic partner. He wants you like they and the implication is he wants you for Nookie. And they're like, you're going to have to do things. Whatever he says, you're gonna have to do it. And like, but like he never does and anything. And so like I'm like, what is I want her? Like
Yeah, what's that
like
mean?
do we have slavery in this world and nobody mentioned it? Because the premise of you need to give me her so she is my property only works if you are functioning in a world that has a slavery system or a very set in stone slavery adjacent indentured servitude system. And so, but anyway, book doesn't
It's so stupid.
doesn't go in any of that. You as a reader are like, what does that mean? What do you mean he wants her? For why, my dudes? And
why would he
like,
keep doing it afterwards too? Like,
yeah.
it's very like, and this is where, okay, no, well, I'll complain about that when we get there. And she's like, oh man, I really don't want that, but I'll do anything for the resistance.
Yes. I'm here, whatever I can do to help. If they won't let me use necromancy to help us win the war, then I will do this instead, you know? Whatever, like, let's go. And so they're like, okay, you have to go meet him. And he's like, oh, hello, bitch. And like, again, and he was like, you have to wear this ring. And if I summon you, you have to come and and we're going to meet at this outpost place. And I'll give you information. And that'll be it. Don't worry about it. Fuck you. And don't you ever call me using the ring, even though you can, because I'm not a dog. You can't summon me. And so the vibe you get is that like, no, Kane doesn't actually give a shit about her immediately. And you're like, and he was like, yeah, you're mine. And she was like, yes, for now and always, even after the war. And he's like, okay. And there's this point where like, for no reason, he's like, kiss me. Cause she was like, I'll do whatever you ask. And he's like, whatever. And like this guy cause like when we find out, so his act, I'm just going to tell you now, in his head, he's like, they're going to try use this girl to get a leg up on me. They're gonna honeypot me with Helena. And might I say, Helena has never shown, like, she's never really dated. She's never kissed someone. And she's just like a nerdy, like, and so like if you're gonna do a honeypot, wild choice. But he's like, I know that if I ask for a girl, then that's what they'll do, and it'll allow me to do what I want, which is hurt Murrow in the undying thing. And then I'll just, like, not fall in love with her. And again, Helena's a weird choice. But he's thinking this, but he has no intention because he doesn't actually like Helena at this point of doing any of it. And so instead of being like something menial, like, because like what would have worked better as far as to make himself seem terrible, but interested in like what they think. Because again, they're like, he wants sex. That's what he wants. And you're going to have to make him obsessed with you. Because that's what they tell her. You need to make him obsessed with you. You need to make him need you so we can use you to control him. And she was like, how the fuck do how am I supposed to do that? And they're like, Vivimancy. And she was like, I don't think you guys know how that works. I can't just make, there's no like, let me press a button and now you're in love with me. Like, that's not how this works. But anyway, and so he's like, kiss me. And so she kisses him, and it's actually a decent kiss. And he was like, wow, that's surprising. And she's like, do you say that to all the girls? Which references back to something that she said earlier in the book, when like in the forward timeline.
Right after he snapped a bunch of necks.
Yeah. And so like so then they start the process of them just, she'll go and he'll be like, here's your letter. And they have a lot of interactions. There's a lot of sass happening. There's a point where he realizes like she doesn't know how to defend herself, and he's like, you are a weakness, you link yourself to me, you cannot be caught. So he starts teaching her about animancy and how to hide her memories. Like if somebody's trying to, because he's like, if somebody captures you and takes you tomorrow, the jig she be up. So he teaches her, and he was like, actually you're an animancer. Then he starts teaching her shit. And then there's this whole thing where he's like, I have to teach you how to fight. And there's just so much. When I tell you this giant section of the book that is like, I think 15 hours, I don't know, it's huge. There's so much scenes where it's just her going, and then he's there, and then they snark at each other and go back and forth, and he's like, fuck the holdfast, and she's like, you don't know anything, you potato. And then there's moments where he's like, actually maybe the world isn't as simple as you thought it was. And she was like, oh my god, the world isn't as simple as I thought it was. and then he comes in one day, and he's like missing an arm. Like he was late, she was gonna go, and he's literally fucking missing an arm, and she heals him, and she's like, I can teach you healing stuff because you've got vivimancy. And then there's this point where she gets attacked by a necrothal, and then he has to kind of help heal her, and so they're teaching each other things. And then he gets he comes in one day, and he's like, basically, so there's this thing that happens where he's like, okay, the Moro and a bunch of people are leaving for Hevgos. If you attack the ports, you'll be able to retake the ports, which will help your supply issues, because there's been a huge amount of supply shortages. Helena has literally been foraging for herbs and medicinal plants to supplement their like dwindling supplies. And he's like, when he lost his arm and he had that battle, he was like, yeah, I had to fight someone for his territory, so now I'm in charge of what he's in charge of. And then he's like, oh, by the way, the ports are going to be available. And so after they do this thing, and like she had to be in the hospital for a really long time. And when she finally goes back to see him after like a week or two, she goes in, and he's like dying. Like his body isn't, because one of the things she discovered when she was healing his arm was if his body is losing too much blood, the regeneration is going to work on like fixing. It was trying too hard to make sure he had enough blood in his body to actually fix his arm, so she had to like stop the blood flow so that his arm would regenerate. And so she kind of learned a bit about his body, and that was one of the things that happened earlier when she first touched him. She was like, whoa, his physiology is fascinating. I'm into that. Kind of like, and that's how the scene is written. She's like, wow, she got a taste of that, she'd like to learn more. And it's supposed to be like academically, but like we know it's like, yeah, we know what that's code for. Anyway, so then when after they take back the ports, and it's this huge victory, and he was like, I was the new person in control of the ports. And she's like, oh my god, so you've been punished. And basically his back is flayed open, and there is a alchemy / resonance array in his back that is keeping his body from healing itself. And she's like, oh fuck, and he was like, yeah, it was my punishment for losing the ports, even though I wasn't here when it happened. Because basically, like, he takes over, he fights a guy for and I'm explaining this because it's kind of dumb. He fights a guy for the like kind of to rule the ports, and so he's now in charge of the ports. Him, Moro, and a bunch of people go off to Hevgos to do something else. The ports get attacked. He's literally been in control of them for like 2 days, like a very short amount of time. They get attacked, and Moro's like, this is your fault. We shall punish you. And in his head, based on his plan, this is supposed to kill him. Because he's like, it'll work better for me and the Resistance if I just fucking die. And the Resistance is actually kind of banking on him dying. And so when Helena comes back and is like, oh my god, he's been really injured, they're like, perfect. And she's like, I'm going to try save him so he can continue to help us. And they were like, she's not going to be able to save him. And they're like, yeah, do what you can. But lo and behold, Helena is able to save him. She's able to kind of stop the back from being as painful. She can't figure out what's happening with the array. And she's spending weeks trying to heal him. And then she has this amulet that was given to her by Ilva when she first became a healer. And Ilva was like, the paladins have stuff like this. And the amulet is super helpful. It keeps her from getting too tired when she's doing so much healing and stuff like that. And it warms when she's using a lot of her resonance. And she looks at it and she's like, what are you? And she's like, her healer's intuition told her that this amulet would help her save him. And she ends up like dropping it, and the stone that was in it cracks, and this like white shiny goop comes out. And she's like, whoa, what is this? And she was like, yes, this is how I'll heal him. And she just like takes, again, she has no idea what this thing is, this white shiny goop, and she picks it up and it kind of solidifies. And she holds it up to his chest and it kind of liquidizes again, and she forces it into his skin, and it saves Kane and he's able to heal. But this starts causing him, because the other thing I have to say is Kane was made undying when he was 16, so he still looks like a 16-year-old because his body doesn't age. And weird. His body doesn't age, and he has the dark hair. But after she does this, and she fixes the array and like heals his back and puts the weird glowy white shit into him, his hair starts turning white silver, and he starts aging, and he becomes like the age he's supposed to be physically, which is good because eventually they're going to do stuff that would have been real weird if he was still in a 16-year-old body, my guys.
Okay, so let's go back to talk about the part before this, though, where they're just going back and forth between houses for hours and hours and hours. There's a couple of problems. First of all, I should just state, if you are already a diehard Dramione shipper, I get why you would like this. Yeah. Fanfic is just about like, ooh, the two characters are together, yay! Like that's a lot of. And again, I don't mean that badly.
Yeah, we do not mean that derogatory. Like that's why I go when I read fanfiction, I was like, I want more of these characters. I want more. It's that Kylo Ren. More. You know, like and like that's what I want, and that's why I went there. And so it's not.
And that's why I don't think it's fair to like roast this as like a fanfic, because it's different. There's different expectations. There's different reasons for reading it. Books aren't like that. Published works have to sell you on the romance and get you to be behind it from like first principles, so to speak. This book doesn't do that. They don't really have good chemistry. They do the man smirks, woman blushes snarkiness a lot, which is not a kind of romance that I enjoy. I think the way that I put this to Maria was that I think that we need to put a moratorium on women writing male love interests for at least the next 5 years until we know what the hell is going on. We need to figure out how to fix this because they're not good at it. And as a man, I don't think they should be allowed to. Now,
basically, all romance should stop.
No, women writing men. They can write lesbians and they can write gay men. They can't write male heterosexual love interests. Okay? I think a lot of women would actually be okay with that, considering how much slash fic there is. Now,
continue.
Though I think gay men would be like, please stop. But anyway, the other thing about it is that he is such a fucking dick to her. And this goes back to the way that the author, on the one hand, wants to be unapologetically like, he's a great character, but at the same time wants you to sympathize with him a lot and kind of let him off the moral hook. He's not quite Heathcliff, where the author knows he's not a good character and is writing him that way, but he's still compelling. He's more like kind of gray anti-hero. And there's also a weird strain of a weird kind of theme of a motif of abuse in their relationship. So like at one point he like breaks her wrist when he gets mad at her for something, and he's very volatile.
He's trying to teach her how to fight, and she tells him like, hey, stop, you're gonna break my wrist if you do this, and he just continues and breaks her wrist. So like it's the, you know, he's not listening. He's so caught up in what's going on in his head.
Yeah, and it's explicitly mentioned, she says, that like when he's not feeling good, he takes it out on her. Yes. And is cruel. And like this is
specifically also says, and you brought this up as well, which is why I'm going to mention it here, that she's like, she never knows if he, even once they start getting romantic, what is going to turn him from being like pleasant to being a dick. Like she's never sure what version of him she's going to get, and how to navigate the one to the other, which is something you hear about with people in abusive relationships.
And it's actually kind of one of the big things is it creates a structure where there's a
You're
lot of trauma and you're drawn to them because
and
the
you're
good times
constantly
make the
off
worst.
balance. Yes.
Yeah, the worst times make it feel more emotionally intense. And then this hasn't come up, but later on she'll be like, everything bad he did for me. So I can't really blame him for it, which is again a narrative that is indoctrinated into abuse people to keep them in that relationship, and that's fucking weird. And also, he starts holding her neck a lot and talking about how she's his,
Yeah.
which I understand is a kink of the authors and a lot of women. But here, it combined
Wild.
with the other abusive elements comes off as real
Yeah.
weird. Like the thing about kink is it works because it's in a
Trusting.
yeah, it's in in a room of safety. But if
Yeah.
it's outside of that room, it's just abuse, and that's a lot more of what this feels like than they're just kind of like a little kinky.
Yep. And I think part of this is the author just didn't know how to like handle the line of like this darker romance. Um but it's just really weird. Like I disliked Kane for a lot of the first chunk of this flashback portion because he was a dick. Um but yeah, after she heals him from the array, like they start getting closer and he's like, I'm gonna train you. And he starts training her, and there's so many like we had the just them interacting montages that lasted forever, and then we start having like training montages that last forever, and he was like, you need better weapons. And we also during this section learn that Shizeo, the metallurgist from the east, the far east. Every time there's two times where she meets him. Once because it's a she's in the present and she doesn't have a memories of meeting him, and then in the past when she did meet him, and she's like, he was from the east, the far east. It says it the exact same way. It is so funny. But anyway, and he's from the Far East. He came to help at the Institute, and then the war broke out, so he's trying to be helpful. And they kind of assign Shizeo to her to be like her lab assistant, and they end up like working companionally together really well. And he is one of the better characters in the book because he has a really interesting story, and he's just compelling. I really liked him.
He's also one of the few original characters, and I think again that's why he works, is because she actually put in the work to make you understand what's going on with him
And get to
he's a
know
little
him.
different.
Yes, and it works really well, and it's in moments like that when I'm like, you should have just had like just
write
write
your
a
own thing.
different book, write your
Yeah.
own thing. I think you would do better. But with Shizeo, she's been doing a lot of stuff helping. But when Kane is like, you need weapons that are made to your resonance, Shizeo helps her figure out what her best metal
Titanium.
type. It's a titanium with a nickel alloy. That's going to be her best one. And so then Kane makes her own resonance, which is super expensive, and like a whole thing. And like there's this like Christmas analog holiday, and she gives him a healing kit so he can heal himself, and she isn't there, and he gives her the knives, and she's like, wow, these are really fancy knives. And while all of this is happening, she's also kind of like losing her place. She's being further isolated from Luke.
Yes, this is the religious analog.
Yeah,
where we find out that Helena, that Jesus on the cross had nothing on Helena when it comes to being a martyr, because God, guys, nobody appreciates her. She understands the real suffering going on because she's healing people instead of in combat, but nobody recognizes how great she is. They're all like, ooh, you got to work harder at this, you whore.
And we're going to replace you. You're kind of annoying, and also we need you to go work with Farron. So we're going to get, even though this whole time we've been like, ew, Vivimancers, we don't like them, and you're irreplaceable, and you have to do all of this stuff on your back. Suddenly we have replacement, like other healers that you're gonna have to train that are your replacements. And it's just like, instead of it being like, oh wow, here are these other, because like there is a way to write these other Vivimancers coming in as healers, which creates bonding with Helena, where she has to train them. They have had to hide this thing their whole lives, and now they're finding use for it. And she, for the first time, is like, wow, I wish there was actually more Vivimancers at the Institute, because this bonding with these people. And so instead of, because it's used as a, oh, poor Helena, and there's so many, because there's so many moments where it's like, oh, poor Helena, nobody values her, everyone misunderstands her, everybody reads her actions the worst possible way. and this is just another one of those things, but using it as something where like maybe these would be people who would eventually like defend her, value her. She became their teacher, and so
Or
a
even they
mentor
would
mentee.
die, and then that would have a mental toll of like, oh, this family I built has now died. That's sad.
Yep, and just make it more of a like show us Helena, because like right now the way the book works is the only time anyone is ever nice to her is with Kane. Even though Kane is really rude sometimes, but he is the only one that's nice to her, and he likes her hair, and he values her. He's like, "Wow, you're so smart. Your healing is so good. You're so good, Vince." And even though he's also a jerk, and so the only good interactions she really has with anyone is with Kane. And the problem with that is that sometimes we need to see our characters. Like there was this book we read, called "Don't Let the Forest In," I think.
Oh God.
And the scenes, some of the best
They're not
scenes,
sending their best.
yeah. Some of the scenes that were the best were the scenes where the main character was interacting with these two other people who were nice to him, that were like trying to help him accept himself, and they weren't connected to the main plot, but they felt like characters, and it showed him in a different situation than ever, because like everything sucked, and then we got to see him in this like cool other situation that didn't suck, and it made, in those moments, he was more likable and the situation worked. And sometimes you need to show your character in different situations, and you cannot just, because the book is going to be like, I'm his, he's mine, this is the only way. And sometimes seeing someone be friends, because like unfortunately during the section we don't get to see her be friends with Luke, really. We don't really get to see her be friends with Lila. We don't really get to see her be friends with Soren. And so adding her having a friendly relationship with, and the only person that it happens with is Shizeo, which makes me so mad that he dies the way he does, because he was the only other character that like, and that it's not more of an emotional beat as far as the loss of him as a human, and only for
well, it also just feels like the most genuine friendship, in that like you saw it build, and you saw that like it wasn't a loud one. They weren't constantly talking about it, but at the end when he makes decisions to help her at his own risk, it's like, oh, that's actually really sweet. They did like each other, and that kind of feels natural and organic to how they interacted.
And given how long this book is, if this book was 10 hours, 15 hours shorter, then you could get away with Shizeo being like the only, like Shizeo and Kane being the only people. But because the parts with Shizeo take up so little of the actual book, and Kane takes up so much, having another group of people that she had a positive relationship with and that we got to see, and using the other healers as more than just, oh, Helena, everybody hating you. You laugh at the worst. Oh, look at Kane. He's kind of shitty, but he likes you sometimes. You know? I would have preferred that. And so after like she saves, did you have anything else to say with that?
No, I mean, I think basically the thing also about Helena being a martyr is that it doesn't feel really organic to the world. It's very annoying. It's the author playing favorites and being kind of like fappy about it, and filleting the character. And there's too much of it. It's like it just that's part of the problem. Is it's just there's just an avalanche. It lasts so long. You're stuck trudging through this swamp of like people don't like her, and she's really doing the real fight. And you know, the author has said that they were really drawn to the story of medics in war. And I was like, okay, but this isn't, but okay, but like, people tend to respect medics in war. I don't know where this idea that they don't comes from. And also, like, you're not actually saying anything interesting about war. That's part of the thing, is that they say the book is really a war story, but it's not. It's just this shitty romance on top of some, like, fighting, and grim, dark fighting. There's very little exploration of what war actually means. It's just kind of a backdrop to what's going on, and a way of depressing the characters, pretty much.
Yeah, completely. And the other thing I would say as far as healers is she's the only, so we have like some nurses, including head nurse Pace, and who don't have resonance. They're just like normal ass nurses. And also this world for some reason is really, despite not having a lot of healers, again, I cannot emphasize this enough. We don't like Vivimancers. Healers are Vivimancers that use their powers to heal people. There's not a ton of them, okay? Rare thing. In the entire Eternal Flame, for the first chunk of the war, like the first 5 years, we have one Vivimancer healer. Just one. There's one. It's Helena, okay? This is not a common thing. But for some reason, this world is like manual surgeons. Paltry. How dare you? Like when there's this point where she's getting trained as a healer, not by someone who is also a healer, but like by this other guy who's a dick. Um, and he's like, "Oh, you shouldn't be using like science. Why are you using chemistry and science to help you as a healer? You go by intuition and using your powers." And she's like, "No, my dad was a surgeon and my mother was a nurse, so I have a really solid grasp of these things. And it actually makes it so much easier to do." And he's like, and so like you're told that normal doctors and surgeons not respected, and I'm like, what do you mean they're not respected? You have one healer in the eternal flame. What are you talking about? This only works as if there's a fuck ton of healers, and that wouldn't work because if there's a fuck ton of healers, then they're not overusing Helena as much as they're using, because that's a problem, because she's the only one. She has to work long shifts. She's constantly just in there doing the shit, all the things, blah 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 blah. And so like you can't have that and also be like, the magic users are like, oh, manual normal doctor stuff in medical practice. Oh, stupid. We'll throw that out. Nobody needs it. And I'm like, get fucked. What are you talking about? You should have a ton of surgeons. It shouldn't just be Nurse Pace and then all the other random nurse. Why don't we have other doctors, like normal ass doctors, who are like, here, take this aspirin for your pain?
I think this is one of the ways in which the world building that the author focused on is not the important world building. This is something that would interact with the story and inform the characters and themes and world, whereas random religious asides add nothing. Like, this is a way that the author just added the wrong kind of info dumping to the book. No, you're totally correct. There's also a problem where it's just very unclear the scale of what's going on. Like, how many fighters does the Resistance have? How are they fighting? What's going on with that? Why does nobody use a sniper rifle? Like, it's real weird, the ambiguity of that portion of it. But okay, so going back and forth, he gets healed.
Yeah, and after he gets healed and the training happens, at a certain point, she's talking to Ilva, and Ilva's like, "Where'd your amulet go?" And because she was like, "You stupid girl, Cain was supposed to die, and you made him live, and now we don't like him, and we want to kill him because him being alive means people will know what happened to us. He's a loose end. He was supposed to die, you idiot." And they were like, "Oh wow, they didn't actually want me to make him fall in love with me." Like they didn't actually want me to make him fall in love with me. They just told me that so I'd be done. But they were always planning to either have him be killed or him die in service of this whole thing. Wow, I'm shocked. And Ilva's like, "How did you manage to heal him? He wasn't supposed to survive." And she's like, "Well, remember that amulet?" And then Ilva's like, "Oh, fuck me, you did not." And so here we learn what actually happened 500 years ago when Orion met the necromancer. So the necromancer was super shitty, and he kind of made a cult in like the coastal areas, and then he took all of the culty people and he killed them, and he fused their energy into this stone of power. But the stone of power would not work for him, and somehow Orion got it, and the souls trapped in this stone attacked the necromancer. Like, all their hatred and like whatever the thing was, that's what actually killed the necromancer and like flattened, because like they talk about this great fire that rained down upon the countryside, and everybody's like, well, obviously God can't help us like that now, because like Orion can't just rain down fire. There's a whole city here and people. Like, God knows what he's doing. But you find out it was never actually God. It was the souls of the people that had been murdered and killed in fighting, or that the necromancer did. And they were like, "Fuck you, necromancer." And then Orion could never use the stone again. And like the holdfasts couldn't, but other random people were able to like use it for some reason, because they were fucking vivomancers. Shocker there. And so she was like, "Oh my God, that's because there's this myth of the like sacred stone bestowed to Orion by God." And everybody's like, no, it wasn't an actual stone. It's just the gift of the gods. The stone is just a representation of the gift. There was no actual stone. And you find out, yeah, there actually was an actual stone, and that this whole thing about eventually the gods will step in and save, because like Orion Luke at so many points is like, I just haven't fought hard enough. We haven't been good enough. What do I need to do to make the gods save us? I've been so good. I've kept up all my shit. What must I do?
Okay, so here's the thing. This doesn't really work in the book because you're not really sufficiently indoctrinated in this culture to believe in this kind of stuff. And it also doesn't mean anything to her. There aren't moments of them praying. There aren't moments of like the links people will go to for this. It's just kind of a thing you're told, not a thing you see through scenes or character actions. Now, this makes a lot more sense if you assume that it has to do with the prophecy of Harry being the one who's going to kill, the one who lived. Yeah. Like, that makes a lot more sense. This kind of like, oh, we think he can save us, but he can't. We're seeing this prophecy deconstructed, and there's a desperation to that. That works. This doesn't, because we're just like, this is just some fantasy bullshit anyway.
And also, the entire time, like, this whole book has been poking holes into the idea of the purity and moral rightness of the holdfasts. This whole time, and part of this has been coming from Kane and just other things, and the whole time, because like the holdfasts are obviously good and the Institute is obviously good, but there's multiple points where Kane's like, well, did you think about this thing? And they're like, oh man, you're right. And even at the end, they're like, we're not doing Principates anymore. That's a thing of the past. So like by the end of it, they were kind of like, the system wasn't perfect kind of thing. So the whole time that like there's flaws, we're poking holes in the facade. And so you don't, and because Helena doesn't believe this religion, she's kind of like, she has her religion that has some similarities, but is a different religion. And so she's always been kind of like, these Northerners with their weird religion. And nobody we know is outside of Luke is like, seems super, super religious. And so again, you've been skeptical. You've been made to be skeptical about the rightness of all of this. The religion is the part that is the most patriarchal. Again, it's not huge. It's not a big thing, but it is the most patriarchal. And then this happens. So you're like, okay. And all this does is being like, oh, wow, everybody's waiting for a miracle that's not going to happen, which Helena the whole time has been like, guys, I don't think miracles save wars. Whoever wins the war gets to tell you what happened. Like, she's already told us this.
Yeah, she's already in on that. Yeah.
Before, so it really doesn't work as this huge reveal outside of the fact that you're like, because like when she decides to put the glowy white shit into him, I was like, I texted Will and I was like, yo, this bitch dropped a stone, a weird substance came out of it, and she was like, yo, I'm gonna put this in my almost boyfriend. And I'm like, what? And the book's like, healer's intuition, hand wave, don't pay attention. And I'm like, what the fuck? And then I find this out and I'm like, yo, you're telling me this powerful artifact that could have been used to like end the war by someone who actually could commune with it, and you just handed it to this guy to be used for this only? Like, wow.
Insane.
Crazy.
Insane. It's so dumb. Like, and also just the fact that McGonagall gave it to her to begin with. Like, what are you doing handing out relics that are incredibly important to random women you don't like? It's a real weird move. And I don't even know what the analog to Harry Potter is with it. Like, I just don't know why it's there.
This is one of the things where I think why I said that there's, I think, 3 stages of world building. There's the original HP world building. There's the world building that happened in the fic that was the AU fic that was different. So I think this probably existed in the fic. And correct me, those of you who have read it, you saucy minxes.
If you've made it this far.
If you made it this far. I think something akin to this was in the fic, because I don't know how else we get out of this. And then like we have the next degree, which is getting it to this point. And so I think there's like 3 degrees of removal that
you're probably correct about that. Okay, all right. Let's move a little forward.
Ilva's like, you have to kill him. And you have a month to make him. And she was like, what? No, I can make him love me. Please. And Ilva's like, you have a month. Otherwise, you have to kill him. And she's like, oh, man, I have to make him. And then, like, they kind of get romantic at this point. I don't remember exactly how it happens. But, like, they're into each other. They're flirting. Things are happening. And then eventually, like, they crash like a wave upon the beach. And then he's like, oh, man, I fell for it. I knew what you were doing. And I let myself fall for it. And she's like, ah. And a bunch of other stuff happens. Like, I don't even remember.
He's very resentful of the fact that, like, oh, it worked.
Yeah.
There's like there's also a theme that the book wants to have of like they lie to each other and then manipulate each other. Like it keeps getting mentioned about that. They'll make promises and then break them, but it like it never actually feels substantial because you always know that like they have each other's best interests in
And
mind and are
heart.
actually pretty respectful of each other's wills and wants and stuff. So it's just real
Yeah.
the
hundred
author
percent.
telling you a thing.
Yes. And their first time is a perfect example of that, where he doesn't realize she's a virgin, and the minute he finds out, he's like, "Oh my god, I would have been so much more gentle." Versus, and so like even this thing, which is a bit rough and tumble, and immediately the book's like shows you that he's like, "Oh no, actually, I wanted you to enjoy that. I shouldn't have done it that way." And she's like, "No, no, we're good." And then we enter the period where he was like, "Oh, I like her and I want her, but I'm not going to be nice to her." And she was like, "And I like you and I want you, but I'm not going to like." We have the stage of them being physically into each other, but not being honest about being emotionally into each other outside of his possessiveness. Because there's this whole thing about, oh, the Farrens, they're so possessive. They just want to have shit for the sake of having shit. And we learned that like his mom had been Morrow basically was responsible for his mom's death. His mom after his dad got
tortured to
captured.
death.
Yeah, she basically got tortured to death, and she was used as a way to control Farron as well as his father. And the two of them don't know each other. Like Farron's father ends up surviving, and the two never talk about the fact of what actually like he never tells his father what actually happened to his mom. So his dad's just kind of like, Farron, you suck. Your mom died, and he was like, you suck, you don't know how mom died, or any like it's just the weirdest thing, and especially for how this is going to play at the end of the book. But anyway,
Fucking
we kind of
bizarre.
yeah, we kind of start working to the denouement of, or not the denouement, but the climax of this portion, which is they have now discovered a couple of things. The Undying have this alloy of this thing called Moliansha, which is a stone slash alloy from the Far East, which we know about because of Shizeo, that can nullify resonance. And they and now the Undying have it, and they're using it in attacks to kind of nullify people's magics and to hurt them, and it makes it harder to heal them. And so our girl starts studying it. On top of that, they learn that when somebody dies, they release resonance in their dying, and you can kind of capture that as a vivomancer into certain stones, specifically obsidian, and then you can use that. And she gets the idea of it from that amulet thing, and she uses that. If you use that against necrothals, liches, the Undying, you can kill them because it cuts off their connection to it. And you also discover that Morrow he puts people's souls in his bones. He keeps the bones on them. Them being Undying fuels him, and he's basically like, it's kind of like the MLM of being immortal. Like, I'm serious. It literally is a giant MLM of being immortal, and he literally has the bits of his bones that he's put stuff in. It's called the phylactery or something,
which I think is like a real D&D term.
Yeah. And so it also means that they're being controlled because they can never like betray him, because he can just take the phylactery and be like, and they can't travel because they can't get too far away from him, because it also has negative effects, because that's where their soul is actually being held. And you learn that like to make someone Undying, you have to kill like 9 people like to do it. And it's kind of got the vibes, but like in no way, because like this would work as a reveal if it was kind of like Novik's Scholomance series, where there's this thing where everybody's like, wow, this is such a good thing that protects people and does a good thing, and then you discover that there's actually a life toll, and it's actually a terrible, like, to get the good thing you have to do a terrible thing, and it's not worth it. And the book, when it is like, these 9 people have to die to make an Undying, and that, you're like, well, that was shit anyway. I don't know why anyone would agree to this terrible thing. It's not like it's told from the point of view of someone who was like, wow,
yeah, like,
I
there's a hidden cost.
Yeah, this is great. And so they're kind of putting all of this together, and then they decide they're going to make a bomb to kind of attack, like they have to do their final push, and they're going to attack before this, Luke gets taken during this one attack. They have to go rescue him. She has to use necromancy to Soren on the way to rescue Luke, or after they rescue Luke, and like Luke's organs are all dying, and they're like, whoa, and he's like open. She has to like heal him up enough that they can take him off somewhere. And during it, Soren dies, and Soren was like, "Yo, Helena, remember what you said about giving people the option to let you use them as necrothals? Me, I'm giving you permission if you need to use my body." And so she has to necromancy him, and everybody's like, "Oh, Helena, you use it." But actually, almost everyone's pretty chill. They were like, "We had to get out of there somewhere." But Luke's like, "Oh, fuck you, Helena, you used necromancy," and everybody's like, wow, Luke was cut open and they were doing weird things to him. I wonder what happened. And he keeps screaming like, get him out, get him out. And everybody's like, doo, 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 doo. And he's like,
he doesn't like having men in his room now. That's weird.
And he's also like, Helena, you can't come in. I hate you because you used necromancy on Soren and you can't be my healer. And this lesser healer who's been doing it for like a year, everybody's like, Elaine, you get to be his healer now. And she's just so busy and doing other stuff. And so then we're coming up to the point where there's supposed to be the big final push. They're going to put the bomb, hopefully kill Morrow. But sacre bleu. The Undying have attacked first, and they took the tower. There's a whole bunch of stuff about Nullium being used in wars. Don't worry about it, or used in battles. But they've taken they've taken the Institute. There was a spy in the Institute who let them in, and she's also putting two and two together. Like prior to them, the headquarters being taken, she's like, oh shit, somebody's telling her about Luke and like the issues. I think it's Matron Pace and all the stuff, and she's like, oh my god, it sounds like he got animanced and necromanced sort of. And basically what she realized is somebody put something in Luke, covered it in nullium, which is the stuff that keeps residents from seeing it, in his body. And actually he has been fighting with someone for control of his mind, and because he wouldn't let her near her, couldn't put it two and two together. Also, there's this girl named Lila who is his head paladin primary. She got prego with his baby, and so she's been in isolation. Everybody thinks she has bog cough. And so she uses, she's like, oh, Lucian. And he's like, get out of here. I don't want to talk to you. And she's like, I'm here to talk to you about Lila. And he's like, oh no, what's wrong with Lila? And she was like, Sacre Bleu, I know you're a traitor. Who are you? Why are you in Luke? And it's like, hi, my name is Cetus, and I am 600 years old. And blah, blah, blah. And they were like, oh my God. She was like, I was not expecting Cetus, the guy from our religious lore who wrote a bunch of stuff about animancy. I thought you'd be Morrow. And he's like, I am Morrow. And you're like, oh wow, Morrow is the high necromancer who fought Orion. And he's like, and he's talking through Luke,
so
okay?
Stupid.
And he's like, I get to be one with my brother. Yeah. And she was like, your brother. And he's like, my brother Orion. Because it turned out the necromancer was actually Orion's brother. And the necromancer was actually the one who gave Orion the ability to do pyromancy and to turn gold, like different metals, into gold. And he was okay just standing in the background. But then his brother started getting too big for his own britches. And he was like, no. And his brother was like, also, you don't get to do vivimancy or anything anymore. And his brother was like, no, I want to make us immortal. The two of us, we can be immortal together. Why be kings when we can be gods? And his brother's like, yo, buddy, you are necromancing. That shit's weird. So they go to war. They fight, and Morrow is cast back by that stone that we mentioned earlier that were the souls of the dead people. And he's like, for years I've been trying to, and finally I'm one with my brother. And basically this whole time he's just been trying to get Luke so that he can be like, he can use Luke's body as part of his reanimation stuff because his body's falling apart. And when Luke's organs were all failing, that's because, and I don't know why they did, like, it's so weird, but they took all of Luke's good, healthy organs, put it in Morrow, and gave him all of Morrow's shitty organs. Like, I'm talking 600-year-old organs, guys.
It's real weird.
And Helena's like, oh, I have to get you out of him. And then Luke's like, he comes to a little bit because she's like, let me talk to Luke. And Luke's like, kill me, hell. You have to do it. We can't. You got to. She's like, no, I won't kill you. And so then Lucian tricks her into like killing him. Don't worry about it. But she like stabs him with the obsidian thing. And he's like, oh, thank God he's gone. And he's like, hell, I'm so sorry, all this shit. And then you also find out, and I don't know why we had to include this, but it wasn't actually Luke that got Lila pregnant, because like the two of them were in love. It was Morrow in Luke's body, because he was like, if I can have the bebe, I need it. Luke's body is good, but I needed the bebe. And fucking hell. Anyway, and so then Luke ends up dying, and he's like, I don't want people to think it was you, so we're gonna, she's like, reanimate this other guy. And she ends up having to leave him in an alleyway as he dies. And he's like, take care of Lila and the baby. Don't ever let her know. And she was like, got it. So then she's like, oh, I've got to deal with all this shit.
Like all this stuff we've been saying pretty much, It's fine. Like, this is actually like there's a good amount of action here.
Action
It's a
and
little
stuff is
over
happening.
dramatic, and it's like, okay, this is kind of expected, but stuff is happening actually. And there isn't a lot of bullshit. Like, there is a lot of Sturm and Drang, but it's kind of like, you're like, okay, this is compelling. Stuff is
I,
happening.
and this is the most engaging part of the book, and it's because like there's a specific plot, consequences are being
There's
had.
action.
There's action. Who is the spy that let everyone in? And it's this character who was abused by the system, and then her sister died, and Mora was like, "I will bring your sister back to life and give you your sister if you." But anyway, so she goes back and she's like, "Oh shit, this whole thing is going." And she goes to Kane and she's like, "Oh Kane, this whole thing is happening. I just got out with my life. Phew." And he's like, "Okay, I'm getting you out of here. Like we're zip zap zopping you out." And she's like, "I can't leave without Lila. I just promised dead Luke that I would look after Lila, so I'm not going with you unless you bring Lila." And he's like, "Fuck." And she's basically like, "If you bring Lila, I will do whatever you said." And he's like, "Perfect. I will make you leave with Lila." And then he's like, "And then I'll go, deal with shit." And she's like, "No, you have to come too." But then when he goes to get Lila, it blows his cover because it's going to show that he came into the hospital because they have records. He came into the hospital, got Lila, left with her secretly, and then everybody will know that he's the traitor this whole time. So she tricks him into taking Lila to the safe point ahead of her because they're using he has a chimera. Don't worry about it. It's this giant like wolf lizard thing named Amaris. And she's like, only two people can be on Amaris's back. You take Lila first. I'm gonna sit here. She's like, I can't leave without letting the resistance know what I know about the obsidian. Get Shazeo, this assistant I had, and then I'll tell him so he can continue helping the resistance. And Kane's like, awesome. I'll go do that, and then I'll take Lila off. And Shazeo comes, and she's like, I don't actually need your help. I'm making a giant bomb so I can blow up that hospital so that there's no records of Kane, and nobody will know he was the traitor. And she blows up the hospital, but then there's a bunch of Necrothals and shit out, so she has to fight them, and she's fighting them. And then, but oh no, Atreus Farron is actually alive and in the body of Jan Cowper, the guy. He's dead now. I have barely mentioned
We
him,
should also state there's these two sisters who, like, one of them died and the other, like, betrayed them all for her.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, it's a real weird side plot that we don't need to talk about, but is kind of inexplicable.
They weren't significant enough to really, like, if the two of
I'm
them
wondering if it was someone in fic or something like that, because otherwise I don't quite know why they're here and why they're so prevalent when they have nothing to do with anything else.
Yeah, it's really odd. And they were the people that Ivy, the girl, the one sister who survived, is the person that let the Undying into the institute and caused that whole thing. And she's like, I did it. They were gonna die anyway. It's just so weird. But anyway, so Helena's fighting, and then Atreus and this guy named Lancaster, like they fight. Lancaster's not undying yet. And she like almost kills Atreus, who is Kane's father, but like Kane doesn't know his dad's alive, and she's like, I'm not gonna be the one to kill his dad for him. Like that's kind of wild. So she like doesn't, and then they end up capturing her, and it's while she's captured at this point that she's like, oh my god, if they start looking in my memories or at like, and she's basically like, I'm just gonna have to animance my memories away so that if anybody, I've been captured, I have to protect Kane. He'll fuck off. He'll go do his own thing. I'm just going to railroad the entire part of the 2 years, anything that involved him, so that I can, if anybody looks in my head, he's going to be protected. And so she mind wipes herself. She's the one that did the thing. She goes into the stasis chamber, and the ring that they communicate with is burning on her hand, basically him saying, where are you? And then we come back to the present. Oh my fucking god.
So right now we're sitting at 2 hours and about 20 minutes for those listening, and we're 85% of the way done with this book. Okay, so we're now back in the present, and the thing about it is that this feels like by the end of the flashback, you were kind of like, okay, I'm kind of interested in what's happening here. And now we're flashing back to the aftermath of the thing that happened, the Handmaid's Tale portion that happened at the beginning. And a lot of the impact of that has been lost.
Completely lost. I forgot she was pregnant by the time I got to this point. And like, I remember, I was like, oh yeah, that was a thing that happened, but it was so long ago.
That's one of the ways that the author is kind of like again, not being an apologist exactly for what he did, but like kind of in terms of like, oh, you don't feel the impact of it because they moved the cups around like that. The other thing we find out is this whole time as High Reeve, he's been hunting down rebels so that he could try to find her, but he couldn't save them. So he has been fucking killing a bunch of innocent people just so he could find her. The book will not deal with, because I thought for sure what it was going to be is like, oh, they think he's finding them, but he's really saving them and shipping them off somewhere.
That's exactly what I thought, because he saves Lila. He sends Lila off. He does the whole thing. And so I had the same thought. I thought he was secretly still helping the rebels this whole time, and he was like pretending to kill them, but then just bringing back other bodies. No, he is actively just every resistance person he finds. And again, like, I'm sorry, buddy, if it's and that's why he puts himself in the High Reeve position. He was like, oh, this will give me the opportunity to look for Helena, because he looks everywhere. He even goes to that hospital where she's being held, but he didn't open the stasis chambers. He just read the records. And like I mentioned, that one lady was like, I'm gonna get rid of all the records of her because I don't like her very much.
And so the other thing we should mention is there's several parts of the book where the good guys torture people. And it's just not commented on. It's commented on as like, oh, that's kind of bad, but it's my least favorite trope, which is torture is effective. But also, we're just kind of supposed to accept it as a thing the characters did, and the book doesn't really denounce it. Like, yes. It kind of does, and you assume it does because torture is bad, but I'm not actually even sure it's really in the text that much. And so you have these characters who have done very bad things. And again, this whole him hunting down the resistance, Helena will take onto her shoulders as he did it for me. Everything bad he did for me. And I'm like, bitch, he was not a good person when you met him.
And the book tells you at multiple points that he doesn't, and that's why it would have been like a cool moment of growth by losing Helena. He starts trying to help other people, because there's multiple points where she's like, I cannot just leave this, because he's like, please, let's just leave. Like, fuck off. You don't need to be here. They take advantage of you. And she's like, no, it's not just the holdfast. The other innocent people, I cannot make myself be safe while they are at risk. And he's like, I don't give a shit about anyone. I don't give a shit about Palladia. This whole time I've just been trying to hurt Morrow because of what he did to his mom. And so this thing, and you're told this at multiple points, is, and part of this is he gets the array, that thing that got put into his back, for some reason makes it so that he loses part of his humanity outside of specific things that he's focused on.
That's the other bullshit abuse analog, which is that he goes into a state where he becomes more callous, and that feels, again, like an excuse, like, oh, the alcohol made me do it. Again, there's a lot of weird abuse motifs in here that I don't think the author is aware of.
Yes.
Abuse apologia, I should say.
100%. And but even like before that, he was kind of like, he didn't actually like care about saving people. And so like this whole time, and it would actually have been a really cool arc for him to go from that to being like, oh, there actually is value in like everyday people, and like, like that's a growth. But the book can't do that, because what it's going to do is say that his goodness is by virtue of him loving Helena, and what he's doing is capable and willing to do for her that adds goodness, but not because he actually learns to be a good people to other humans and other people. And it does it because as a romance trope, I assume people love it. But as far as like a story,
it's because they want that the romance trope is, he's so possessive and he's good to only her, kind of a thing. That's the trope, but that makes him a terrible person.
Yes,
and me and Maria are not here for terrible people.
No, and there's such an opportunity for him to actually grow and end up, like, especially in her absence, end up becoming, like, through helping Lila and, like, Lila's son that she eventually has, to go, maybe there is value outside. Like, Helena wanted this, so I'm going to do it for her, and then learning to have value in those things and learning to value, like, the small common good of humanity. And that doesn't happen. That would have been such a cool thing to happen, and find out that he had actually been like, because you find out once we get back to this thing, that the person who had been killing she thinks there's like a revolutionary, but the person who had been killing all of the Undying before the flashback started was him, and he was using the obsidian to kill all these. And I'm like, why weren't you doing this the whole time, buddy? Like, why once she anyway? And the idea is, his plan was, once he found her, was to weaken by killing the Undying, weakening Moro, making everybody realize Moro was weak, present himself as the actual High Reeve and thus the replacement for Moro, and then after he gets Helena to Lila, him dying, and thus making it so that international powers will be like, oh, the new Paladia is so weak and they're kind of shitty, so we'll attack. Even though this entire time we've been like, oh well, fuck New Paladia and all this atrocities committed there, but it's such a weird plan. And this whole section is filled with like at first she's like, oh my god, how could you do those things? Because like she gets her memories, and there's this whole portion where she's like kind of vacillating between the memories of the present and the past, and like dealing with all of that, and but eventually like they kind of coalesce, and then she finds out that his
this
plan.
Part of the book kind of works in a like, I'm like, oh, I recognize the intensity of this hurt, comfort, darkness, and intimacy and hopelessness, but also intimacy. And I was like, okay, I could see how this would work as a fic if you were into this. But like, bear in mind, we are 30 hours into this book, if not 32. Literally. It's been a long fucking time.
And it really is true where that last section of like the fall of the eternal flame and this function better because like and just work better, like Will said.
There's also some stuff with like, yeah, and it's also like there is a little bit of like the two of them reclaiming what was split between them. She makes the point that they were both assaulted, which, okay, but that's only because the author hemmed you into that. It doesn't feel like a genuine exploration of that. But they also kind of get over it, and she's immediately pro having a kid, which is like weird.
Yeah.
It's weird.
And he and I don't like it. Isn't like, not that he doesn't want her to have the kid, but he kind of like it was from a shameful point in his life kind of thing. But she quickly discovers that his plan is to get her rescued and then have him die, and she's like, no, I have to save you. So then this last part is her trying to figure out how to reverse the process of the Undying. And eventually, with enough time and research, and she also finds out that Shizeo, who we saw at the beginning of the book, who's working with the Undying, is actually there to help her. He gave himself over because he's actually the brother of the Emperor of the Far East, and has been. Did I say?
I think you just said Emperor of the.
I said the brother of the Emperor of the Far East. I thought for a second I said mother, which would have been funny, but anyway. And he's actually been working towards helping, and he specifically was there because he's the person who makes the manacles, and so they would bring him in, and that way, if Helena ever got captured, he would be one of the first people to know, so he could let Kane know. And then he also was like, oh, how can I get Helena to them? And that's why he brought up the whole transmutation thing, because the High Reeve would be the person, like a bunch of stuff. And it's so like, there's not like, oh my god, Shizeo's alive, and yeah, he's doing this, but he was doing it to help me. Like, when I tell you she barely thinks about Shizeo in this last section, it's so annoying.
Justice for Shizeo.
But basically, once she figures out he's going to kill himself, he's like, Shizeo's going to be the one that's going to take you to Lila, and then the three of you are going to fuck off. But she's trying to like work on the thing, but he's also trying to keep her from getting too stressed. The stroke she had before she got her memories back was so bad that it's given her heart problems, and if she gets too stressed, she'll have like a heart attack kind of thing. So they have to keep her cool and even. But he lets her like look into all of this stuff, and she basically discovers how to undo what Moro did. And basically they would need the phylacteries, his phylactery, and then she can kind of reverse it, but to do it would need a soul willing to die for that person. And so they're like, oh, basically we can't do that. And she's like, well, if we can just get the phylactery, we can take it with us because you'll be able to travel, and then I can keep workshopping and see if there's another option. And Ivy ends up, the girl who did the Great Betrayal earlier, ends up at their house, and Ivy's like, oh my god, Helena, you're here, I'm coming to rescue you. And she was like, no, you can't, like this whole thing. And then she finds out like Kane is actually like good. And she was like, oh, that works in my brain because you actually saved me me and my sister when we were young. So anytime I had with her, I owe to you. And she's like, Helena's like, okay, if you want to help us, get his phylactery. It's in the right arm of Moro. So get that for us. And Ivy's like, will do, Pikachu. She fucks off. And then there's this whole thing where Atreus comes in and he's like, "Oh, my son, you suck. You didn't have sex with your wife, and I'm going to take over. The high necromancer wants me to take over, looking for the traitor, the whoever is killing everyone." And there's tension between the two of them because they don't like each other, and he keeps like torturing people in the house, and it's crazy. And then eventually there's this confrontation, and you learn.
By the way, again, Kane just sits around and is there for, and it's never really, talked about that he's just sitting around doing absolutely awful things to people. Yes. And yet we're supposed to still root for him.
Yep. And eventually there's this big confrontation. Atreus kills Farron's wife. But you discover that he is being forced now, because everything he did before was because of his wife originally, Mr. Atreus, because he's exactly like Farron, where he'll do anything for the woman he loves. And he never really liked Cain because, he blames Cain for the reason his wife died. And Helena ends up having a conversation with him, and she was like, no, that's not why your wife died, and she puts her memories into his head of Cain telling her about his wife, or about his mother and all that. And he was like, oh my God, why didn't he tell me, that shitty kid, blah, blah, blah. This is all your, and like, they have a fight, but eventually it comes out. They're talking through what's happening. He discovers, because she's like, Moro's controlling you by telling you he'll kill Cain unless you find the person, right? And he was like, yes, that is what's happening. And he's the last of Enid, my wife, and has her eyes, so I can't let that die, and she'd want me to save him. And so she's like, well, you can't find the person to save him because he is the person. So what are you going to do, Pikachu? And then it basically comes out where she's like, please come with, like, because he's like, you have to leave now. Shit's going down. Kane's like, you need to go. And she's like, no, I won't leave. Oh yeah, they find out Shazeo's dead. There was the envoy that was coming in with him was attacked by this other nation who's finally decided to get involved, who attacked a different envoy train car for a different country named Hevgos. It's such a weird move politically why they would attack this Hevgosian envoy. But anyway, and Shazeo ties, and like there should be an amount of sadness for the death of Shazeo. There is not. The plot has like, we no longer have time for emotions. We have to get through shit kind of vibe. And she's like,
Cain, Farron, and his dad is that there's a lot of kind of family trauma here in terms of like, oh, his wife died in a way he didn't know. I think we haven't mentioned yet. And there's like, he kind of loves Farron, but he doesn't. And he's going to end up sacrificing himself so that Farron can be non-necromanced. But the thing is that it's not that this is entirely ineffective or unnuanced, but this is a story element and relationship that is being built 34 hours into this book. There is we spent a shit ton of time with his father has not been on screen for 30 hours. And even then was not on screen a lot, was just like, oh, isn't Lucius Malfoy kind of evil? So this is what I mean when I say like the book is just very inconsistent and they didn't go back and backfill the parts of the story that the plot was going to rest on.
100%. And you need so much more of him, because like he overhears a conversation where she's like, if we can just get your thing, I can reverse this. And he's like, you need a willing soul. Who's going to be willing to die for me? And his dad was like, you didn't think to ask me? And it becomes this moment of him being like, your mother would want you to live, so I would do it. And he's like, I don't want my father's soul. Fuck that guy. And eventually she has to like talk them into it. And it's this whole moment of his dad being willing to let himself die to save him. And it just doesn't have any emotional impact, like Will said, because we have not built this character up enough. And in a fic, again, where you're getting it chapter at a time, this probably works better because, what you remember.
You could develop this right at the end and be like, oh, okay, this is happening now.
Yes.
But in here, it needs to have happened as part of the cohesive story.
Exactly. Atreus needed to be a much more significant character to build and kind of earn it. It's the same complaint I had when we read the third ACOTAR book, where Farah's father suddenly gets a redemption arc at the end and like becomes, and like it just doesn't work because we just have not interacted with him as a character at all. And now coming in all of a sudden at the end, and it's the exact same problem. But anyway, they do the Ivy comes and she's like, I got his arm, and she throws it, and Atreus is like, well, gee, lucky, my bone is also in that arm. And so they do the ceremony. She undoes him. Also, Atreus had prior to this point been torturing Helena with fire, so her back is all flamed up, burnt up. She puts Cain's soul back in his body. His father dies. They escape on Amaris and flee. He's really weak. She's weak. She's like, you can't use your vivimancy. The tether is so light upon you. Like any major energy you use could fuck your soul up and kill you. And he like heals her. They spend like 3 days traveling overland to get to where Lila is. They find Lila. She's like doing okay. She has her son. His name is Apollo, who she calls Pole. It's so funny that it's Apollo, which is a Greek name. And we have a kind of Greek analog in this this world. Hysterical. Anyway, and they call him Pole, and Lila doesn't like Cain. Cain is doing better. They kind of like it, but now they have to travel. Now they have to leave.
Now we're back to slice of life of them hanging out on an island apart from everybody else, having a little family together, and they have their son or daughter. And at first, Cain is like, "Well, that's not a sexy woman, so I'm not interested in her." But slowly, he learns to bond with the child, because the big thing is that Cain really fears emotional relationships throughout this whole thing. Because they've betrayed him before. Isn't he sad boy? And this is the part where Helena's like to Lila, like, I know he's terrible, but he's terrible because of me, so I can't really blame him. Again, abuse apologia. Other people's actions are not your own. And this feels very anticlimactic, because what will happen is that Lila will go off and kill Morrow. But Helena just hears about this. And there's an extent to which this works better in a fic than it does in an original story. Like in an original story, Morrow would have shown up and they would have killed him before they set out. That's how it should work. But I get it doesn't totally unwork here, because by this point I just wanted the story to be done, and I didn't really care about that. So it could have been more elegant. But
yeah, because the war gets won by those other nations. And they're like, but we couldn't kill Morrow. He's too powerful, and he sequestered himself in these caves. And Lila's like, I'ma go into those caves and kill the bastard.
And I think it also has to do with focus, which is that if you are invested in the war and what's happening there, this feels frustrating because you're not there for it to end. But that is only something that would happen if you were reading this as original fiction. If you're reading this as fanfic, then you're already like, oh, okay, I don't really care about that. I just care about them making kissy faces.
Your pairing is in a seaside cottage on a cliff, learning how to live a life together, and his chimera didn't end up dying and found her way back to him. And, you know, they're living lives. Also, Enid is their daughter, and Pole become like super into each other, and they're like, wow, she's our daughter, she's going to become obsessed and never be able to be with anyone else or have friends with other people because she likes that guy, and that guy's going to be her only friend. And I'm like, no, can we not have people who make other friends but also like people? Like and they were like, that's who we are. And
I hate it.
It's so, but yeah, so the book ends with a flash forward where Enid finally goes to Palladia to train at the Institute. I think she's like 16 or something at this point. And Lila and Pole meet her off the boat or whatever she took to get there. And God, my throat, my voice.
I'm so tired. I have a headache, guys.
I can't wait to eat. I'm so hungry. I haven't eaten yet. It's 1 p.m.
We're struggle bussing here, guys.
But Enid, and they show her like the war memorial, and she's like going to go to school, and they were like, yeah, we need some good vivimancers and stuff like that. And then there's this point where she goes into a bookstore, and there's like this new comprehensive history of the War of Palladia, and the guy is like in the store. He was like, yeah, if you want to know what happened, this is the book you should read. And she opens it, and she goes to a chapter that is titled High Reeve, and talking about like the terrible war criminal. Because like the thing is, Helena would be fine. Lila gets to go back, but like nobody knows that he did all the good things he did, that he was a spy for the resistance, and he also just did so many terrible things that even if they did kind of know, it would still be really shitty, and he probably wouldn't forgive him, kind of thing. That's the vibe. And she's like, wow, nobody knows. And she's like, also, nobody knows about my mother and her contribution, because there's like the only reference to Helena at all is a photo where she is mentioned, because she's in the photo with Luke, Soren, and her on a couch kind of chilling, and it's the only thing. And she was like, I hate that my mother isn't mentioned. Like, and Pohl is like, don't worry, like,
Go make out.
your parents are and you get like they kind of have a romance thing going, and then like that's just kind of how the book ends. Like her and Kane are on the island living their life. He kills someone, or I don't know, like he goes and he finds Stroud and kills Stroud, and she's like, you can't do that, but God, I'm so glad she's dead. And it's just like, that's it. That's the, and it's just it doesn't work for this. This should have been such a longer, not the denouement portion of them on the island, but like the actual like them back in the present should have been a much longer part of the book. And by
that's
longer,
the real plot. Like,
yeah.
So okay, I'm worried that after having listened to this all, we haven't done a good enough job of showing you how bad this book is. There are certain books that I think we fundamentally took down very well, like a lion on the safari. But like in this one, I don't think you guys are getting how bad it is. However bad you think it is now, it's worse. It's worse because it's longer. It's more
so
boring.
Everything is so repetitive.
Yeah, and so I, especially because the ending does have a certain amount of satisfaction to it, because there's just the sheer weight of words up until this point has kind of gotten to you. And so you may be thinking like, oh, this might sound good. It's not. This is such a terrible book. And I think that there are a few things I want to say about it. So when I initially had heard the fic, I thought it was romanticizing the abuse a lot more. That was the impression I had gotten, was like, ooh, somebody who's really into Draco and Hermione was like, oh, let's do this. You know what I mean? Like, I thought it was going to, and it doesn't, but it's also not there respectfully. It is there as shock value, and it is something that, even if they wrote it, the author wrote it in the original fic, should have been exercised from the when it was published. And the fact they didn't shows that they're not really taking it seriously. It's just there for shock value and like, oh, I don't really want to change things. And so I don't think the book gets off on that point. I still think that part is irresponsibly handled.
And I made the point that you could still have Enid as a character and have the ending, like the ending scene, happen exactly the same way, and just not have it be from Assault. Just have them get like in the time skips, because you get a bunch of time skips of once they get to the island of what their life looks like. Have her get pregnant, and then have him deal with his, like, he's not sure, like, his father was a terrible person. He doesn't know how to be a father. He doesn't want to be like his father. And then just have that as like a conflict. You don't need Le Bébé in the previous portions, because like her pregnancy, it's not like earlier when like they were traveling, her pregnancy made her delicate and like it affected how they were able to travel. It was the burns on her back that were the biggest limiting factor. Her pregnancy is not far along enough. Also, I didn't mention this before, but this author multiple times says the bump between her hips. When Lila's pregnant, it talks about the bump between her hips. And there's multiple points where a baby bump is described as between hips. And like, it's up here. It's above the hips. And like, I don't understand.
There's no real space there, guys.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works.
There's this point where Lila reaches out to her hips when she finds out she's pregnant. And I'm like, who reaches there? What are we? It's just so weird. It's so weird. But
I think also the author wants you to excuse Farron while at the same time saying they don't. It reminds me a little of Shadow the Conqueror, in that the author's like, oh, isn't this a terrible person? But then I'm going to make them my avatar and talk about how great they are all the time. But also, I'm not going to have to defend that, because I'm just going to state out the outset he's morally bad. Like, that kind of feels like that here, where it's like, I'm going to from the outset say that he's morally bad, but isn't he hot?
Yep.
Like,
and also, he is made good by loving this one person and doing good for her, but not like for humanity as a whole. Like he never makes that transformation. He never has really guilt about his own actions. Like he comes out of the war and stuff and is restless and is unable to focus on things. Like, and he has like that bit of like where you get like soldier who can't live a normal life kind of vibes, but like it's not because of guilt, it's because he lived on high alert and in such a high intensity environment that not having that, like, he's patrols shit, like, and that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. And so it's not like he's racked by the guilt of all the lives he lost, and how can he atone. And he actually helps Helena and becomes like the local doctor. And because like Helena ends up like making healing drafts and helping people, and so people are like, she's also from Etris, because that's where they end up, so like we'll protect her. But like he could also use there was a line earlier where she was like, you would have made a great healer, and he was like, oh, that would help against my body count. And I'm like, yeah, it would. Like, but that's not the story. Again, to have that story would remove the trope of he's shitty to everyone except her and her daughter thing. But like, and that works, I guess, in a fic where, but in a original fiction, you want growth out of your characters, and the growth cannot just like, and for me as a reader, I'm just gonna couch that this way. The growth cannot just be he fell in love with this one person and is now better to this one person, because like that's not actually, that's falling in love. That's not a character arc.
Yeah, and that also makes him a very one-dimensional character who is not really a character so much as he is a fantasy.
Yep.
And we're just not here. That doesn't make for good literature. It just doesn't. It's candy that's nice for a little bit, and then you eat too much of it and you feel a little sick. You're not supposed to have fast food all the time, guys.
Nope.
Okay, I might have Katie and Val, I think, do one of the other Dramione fics that have been published.
Ooh, yay!
There's one called Rose in Chains, and there's another one called The Irresistible Urge to Fall in Love with Your Enemy, or something like that. So those are more lighthearted. I know actually Val read part of this fic originally. And so that might be kind of interesting to contrast. We'll have Blonde Woman Hour. Yeah, this was real bad. Don't read it. If you've made it this far, this is like one of our longest reviews. I'm so tired.
I'm so tired. I'm so hungry.
I didn't even make that board I was going to say with like the people printed out or whatever.
Nope. Will and I have discussed maybe in the future doing like a video essay, because there's so much to talk about with this book. And again, I think focusing on it, like, how do you take a fan fiction? Like, what works in a fan fiction? How do you take a fan fiction? Like, what's the mechanic of writing an AU fic that you have to do? And then if you're going to write an original fic, is it possible to do that based off of a fanfic? Like,
I mean, I've had fanfics I wrote that I was like, oh, it'd be cool to turn this into an original fic. And I look at it and I'm like, no, the thing I like about it is how it comments on the original context. And if I just change names, all of a sudden you lose a lot of depth and you have to replace it with something, but you can't. And like, that's the thing, is that you can't. Funnily enough, a better fanfic to original fiction story is 50 Shades of Grey, because that's not a good series by any means. It's really poorly written and bad for society, but it doesn't really depend on you understanding Twilight. Like, it really doesn't reference Twilight almost at all. You don't need to know that part.
It's only the part where you're like, oh, because it just like in Twilight, where the character meets the rest of the cast and doesn't know them and then gets to know them. Like, the same thing happens where like you have the love interest and then like his friends and family that you interact with. And I honestly, I had the same thought reading this, where I was like, I don't love the 50 Shades books at all, but I do think it worked better as a
functionally
with filing the serial numbers off, especially because it was so like it removed all the supernatural elements, versus here we still have the supernatural elements. And so like, yeah, I don't know. I'm just tired, guys. This was long.
I'm tired. We will. Are there other published fanfics that were actually good? I think fanfic writers can write very well. Naomi Novik, shout out. But she decided to write her own series first off, not try to publish her Master and Commander /fic. All right. We love you all. Our parasocial darlings. We're tired.
Bye.